All that you get with vitamin D is health and happiness.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. It's Inspired Conversations with Craig, and the mainstay of my podcast, as you know, Vitamin D. Let's go back down this exquisitely interesting rabbit hole for another inspired conversation. Now, anything we discuss here today, of course, don't take it as medical advice. It's for your information only. And I tell you what, I hope my guest is able to provide you with some very interesting nuggets and a new perspective on vitamin D. So, look, an introduction here, Dr. Joel Gould. Look, I'm stoked to have you on my show. Thank you very much for being on my podcast. There he is up on screen. He's got a lovely set of eyes. He's probably my best looking guest so far in the vitamin D space, I have to say. Now, before we crack into it, just give us a background, Joel. People will be watching this. They'll be wanting to know a little bit more about your professional background. It looks like you're in a professional setting there. Give us the introduction.
Sure. Well, thank you, first of all, for having me on your podcast. I am a general and cosmetic dentist. And to give you a little bit about my background, I kind of like to say it this way: is who am I and why should you care? Why would the information I have be useful? So I'm from Canada originally. I was born in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. And as a Canadian, I have kind of a fondness for both Australia and New Zealand because I feel like we're very similar countries. I grew up in the shadow of the US border, always living within an hour and a half away my entire life before I moved to California 22 years ago. So I graduated from dental school at the age of 24, and I worked for the government for my first year in public health, dentistry, and pediatrics up in northern Canada. And that was a very interesting job. I got to see and do things that the average new graduate would never get to do. It really jumped me ahead in my career. I moved to Vancouver, British Columbia, which is an incredible and beautiful city that apparently is very similar to Auckland. And I hear that a lot. I have not been to Auckland, but I've been to Australia. So Vancouver is a beautiful city. I practiced there for 10 years. I had 2 general dental practices, and I became an expert in snowboarding and dentistry. About 10 years into my practice, I wasn't happy in Vancouver. And even though it's such a beautiful city, I don't know why I never felt comfortable there. But at some point in time, I decided I was going to relocate to Los Angeles. And there was something about this town that I just fell in love with as a kid, coming to Disneyland when I was, maybe 10 or 11 years old. There was something about this environment that really just made me want to be here. Now, what's interesting is that it's sunny here all the time, and it's very cloudy and rainy in Vancouver. And ultimately, I think humans really need to have more sunshine in their life. So to me, it makes sense that I wasn't happy and wanted to be here. Now, I've been in this area, Manhattan Beach, California, which is still a part of LA, but it's just south of the airport. And you've heard of Santa Monica, that's north of the airport. So Manhattan Beach is a beautiful beach community. Some people call it Beverly Hills at the beach, and I would agree with that.
I've seen the muscle men on that beach.
There you go.
A couple of times. I know what you're talking about there. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. So I've been in this location for 22 years. I've been a dentist now for 32 years. And I'm a clinician. And what that means is that I'm a doctor that works one-on-one with people on a daily basis. So over the years, I've had a lot of realizations about health and wellness. And as a dentist, I haven't been brainwashed by big pharma, and I haven't been manipulated. For some reason, dentistry has escaped a lot of the typical things that happen with medicine, where doctors become basically employees of big pharma, and they don't realize that their entire medical education has been sculpted by big pharma specifically to sell their products. Dentistry, they seem to have left us alone. Now, the other neat thing about being a dentist is that dentists have always been interested in prevention. And medicine doesn't really have time to do that, but dentists are always bothering you saying floss your teeth and brush your teeth. And, we're really into prevention rather than waiting until something fails before we fix it. And I say that prevention is always better than repair. So over the last 32 years in 2 countries, I've had a really broad range of experiences. I had 2 other practices outside of this area. So I've been around a long time. I've mentored many dentists, and I've done every style of dentistry that there is. And about 7 years ago, I discovered I had sleep apnea, which was a shock to me because I learned that it happens to people who don't care about themselves and who don't take care of themselves, and it's their fault because they're not a good person. And I'm here to tell everyone about sleep apnea. This is an interesting syndrome, and it's not at all what people think. And yes, it's very much related to vitamin D. So my professional background is that, I've got a really broad range of experiences. When I moved to this area, I became associated with some of the small companies around here. It's a very heavy tech industry, and I ended up spending a lot of time at Quest Nutrition. I'm not sure if they have Quest bars in New Zealand, but those are they were the first ketogenic type of candy bar. And I actually would hang out at their location. They had an R&D department where they would fly in people from around the world, which is where I became exposed to some really kind of wacky, different experts. And I really had a very different perspective on what health is. One of the CEOs of the company, Ron Penna, was very into health and wellness. And he was really on a mission to find out how to live forever and stay healthy and young. And so I got to meet some really incredible experts. So I've got a really unusual set of experiences. And it sort of allowed me to have a broad review of health and wellness. And I'm also a patient myself. I have a history that we can talk about that made me maybe more aware of what modern chronic illness is.
Look, I think personal history, Joel, is really pertinent. I mean, for folks that have followed along with my journey with cluster headache, oftentimes people refer to it as suicide headache. In the throes of it, in 2015, and again, viewers will have heard me say many times, 8 days. And 400,000 international units of vitamin D later, I got my life back, and it was a really profound experience. And the reason I'm here talking to you, just trying to, I guess, unpack it and make sense of it. Now, of course, if for folks watching this that haven't had that transcendental experience in fixing their own health with vitamin D, they'll still be filled with a lot of curiosity about the potential benefits and I dare say a little bit of fear around treading forward, because 9 times out of 10 they are not going to have the support of their family doctor, in particular in my country down here in New Zealand. So Joel, let's talk about your personal history, right? Crohn's disease. Now, I have friends with this, and I've got friends with many other types of irritable bowel syndrome, like you see. It's common. 1 in 5 down here in New Zealand deal with IBS. It's unreal when you consider there's 5 million of us. That's considerable amount of people. Now, what I want to say and what I find really fascinating about connecting with you is that in terms of experience around dosage, there's some absolute synergy, right? What you're talking about in your personal experience around 80 nanograms per milliliter is precisely where the magic happened for myself. So I'm like, this dude's onto something clearly. Now, talk to me about your personal experience and your background into this from a Crohn's perspective.
Sure. Well, so I'm going to, you can see behind me, there's a poster. It's my book called The Modern Epidemic. And I'm going to go through my history kind of quickly. And just to know that these are all the symptoms of people who are ultimately suffering from this syndrome. And it's a vitamin D deficiency that we'll talk about sort of later, how profound that is. But for me personally, as a child, I was that sick kid who had colds and flus. And I had a runny nose most of my young life. I had my tonsils out at age 4, and I started to get fat in the 5th grade. And an 11-year-old, 12-year-old doesn't know why they're starting to gain weight. And I don't know what it was. I was just being a kid. At the age of 14, I had a terrible attack of really severe diarrhea out with a group of 14-year-olds. And I embarrassed myself in public. These things happen. It was quite traumatic to me, but I never recovered from it, because after that episode, I had terrible pain and embarrassing bowel movements, having to go to the bathroom sometimes 20 times a day. Anyone who has Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, or has a loved one or knows somebody who has this, I want to just tell you this, as bad as it looks, it's worse than you think, because I hid my disease. It was so embarrassing to me. And it wasn't just the urgent, painful diarrhea at the worst times. It was thinking about where the bathrooms were. So from the age of 14 on, I had to go through this experience initially where they didn't know what was wrong with me. Crohn's disease was just up and coming. It wasn't that common back in those days. This is a long time ago. And my diagnosis was a relief. They said, oh, you've got a genetic disease. You have Crohn's disease, too bad. And I was put on prednisone. And if anyone's listening to this, that's always the first choice of drugs. Prednisone ruined my body from the age of 14. I didn't go through puberty till I was probably almost 18. And I became a very difficult person. Prednisone gives you that steroid rage. So I had a very, very tough childhood. And when you have this disease, you sort of start to plan your life around the bathrooms, and it affects every single move that you make. I was only hospitalized once, and I was very lucky that I did not need surgery, because I can tell you, I've got people who've contacted me who've had their lives destroyed because they were a little less lucky than I was. So I suffered from this, and I planned my life around this, where I lived, where I worked. Funny story, when I moved to California, I looked at a dental practice for sale in Santa Monica, and I really liked it. And I said, where's the bathroom? And they said, oh, it's out in the waiting room. And I literally just, like, you could see the blood rush out of my face. And I was like, well, I can't buy this office. I can't have a bathroom in the waiting room. My patients will see me going to the bathroom over and over again. I'm going to stop a procedure to go to the bathroom. I chose dentistry because I could never be in an operating room and have urgent diarrhea. I'm in the middle of surgery. Being a dentist was an easy fit for me because I found an office with a private bathroom, and I'm good. No one at the dentist, you're often waiting anyway. You don't know whether I'm in the bathroom or not. So I just managed myself, and I created a life built around my disease, including where I lived, what my commute was like. I had my safe bathrooms, and a safe bathroom was one that had more than one stall, because I didn't have a lot of time. I had a 5-minute warning most of the time. So it was very embarrassing. And then, you get to the whole thing, a grown man, a doctor, somebody who should be able to take care of themselves, being afraid to go on a plane, not eating 2 days before I get on a flight. So it's a very destructive disease, because it doesn't just come with the physical pain and the embarrassment and the symptoms. I'm on a date and I'm worried about diarrhea every time. It came with the neuroses, because the syndrome causes anxiety and depression. And just until the age of 47, I suffered with this. Now, by accident, when I discovered I had sleep apnea, I found my health guru and a woman who saved my life, Dr. Stasha Gomanak. And I contacted her, and what she said to me was, Joel, I'm so sorry, you have Crohn's disease and you're fat. And anyone can look at my old videos. You can see me slowly over time reshaping my body, because it's taken me the last 7 years to really understand what's gone wrong with our health. And I like to sort of use this expression: you can't fix or repair something unless you understand how it works and know why it broke down in the first place. And our doctors haven't got a clue. And I'm a doctor. So that was my life experience. And just to let you know, my recovery wasn't instant. It took 3 months. But I woke up one day, and what I realized was that the pain that I had been in my back and my knees and my neck, that I thought came from being a dentist and getting older, was really all just vitamin D deficiency. So I woke up one day and I didn't think about the bathroom. I was shocked. I caught myself out in public, not having gone 5, 7, 10 times before I got out there. So I didn't believe it at first, but I had no clue. And the first thing I did was Google vitamin D, Crohn's disease, and PubMed. To anyone who doesn't know, PubMed is the medical website that all doctors look at when they see an article on online. We don't care about that stuff that someone wrote. We care about research papers. So I went online and I just typed that in: Crohn's disease, vitamin D, and PubMed, and boom, 3 studies, all small studies. The first study I read had 30 people, 28 of them had resolution of their Crohn's disease with 5,000 IU of vitamin D alone. That's it. And I got so, I can't even tell you how I felt. 34 years I spent in bathrooms. 34 years I wasted my life to find out that all that was ever wrong with me was a lack of sunshine. And this was both grotesque and fantastic. But now I had to unravel my life and create a whole new life that wasn't based around my bathroom habits. So this was very devastating. And you can imagine I've got a doctorate of science with a background in molecular biology. When I saw this, all I could say was, what the hell is this that this could happen to someone like me? And even worse, I have patients who have colostomy bags. I have patients who've been sick their whole lives on all these autoimmune medications that do cause cancer. Yeah. They do.
Yeah, and it's an element of it's the disbelief that something so simple that you could get from and cheap and it could be so profound.
So I walked around. I had a plastic bag with I had magnesium, vitamin D3, vitamin K2, and MSM sulfur. And that plastic bag that cost me $23 at the pharmacy changed my life profoundly and has changed the lives of others, because my goal is to share this information as widely as possible, because people are suffering for no reason. It's not right. It's not right.
We just sticking with the 3 months type thing. Like, what did you do alongside the vitamins E and magnesium and Keto and whatnot? Did you stop eating burgers at that stage? Like, what are the changes did you make in your life to see such profound impact?
Right. Well, ultimately, I ended up changing everything, because almost all of the information that you see on mainstream media is completely wrong. It's the exact opposite. When I was younger, my mom came home one day and said, "Hey kids," it was maybe 1982, 1981, said, "Hey kids, we're not eating meat anymore. It causes cancer and heart disease, and it's unhealthy." We used to eat meat every night. My mother was an incredible cook. And then we switched to pasta. So if it wasn't bad enough that I was already a fat kid, this just got worse. So I want to go through, ultimately, we're going to get to the root cause of this disease. But basically I took vitamin D3, vitamin K2, magnesium, and sulfur. And I didn't change my diet at that point, but ultimately I did. I dropped my carbohydrates and I increased my ketogenic foods, my red meat, my cheeses, my eggs. And we're going to talk about that. And I like to tell people that, the food that you see they're presented with daily at restaurants and in the grocery store, this is not what humans eat. If you went to a grocery store 15 or 20,000 years ago, what would you find on the shelves? You'd find meat, and you'd find red meat, primarily the meat of ruminants. You'd find some eggs, and you'd find seafood. You would not find anything else. That's it. And you wouldn't find kale, and you wouldn't find butter lettuce and all these veggies. There's been ice ages where people could not eat the rainbow. We don't have to. We are not vegetarians. We are not vegans. We are animals, and I eat an animal-based diet. Now, ultimately, the syndrome itself causes you to crave carbohydrates, because when your D level goes down, your gut microbiome shifts and it sends a signal to your brain to literally be craving sugar and carbohydrates, because this was an evolutionary advantage to our ancestors. In winter, they would be craving food. They would be out there looking for something to eat. And in the winter, if you can't find meat, you can't even, if there's snow on the ground, you can't even dig up tubers. There were no sweet potatoes. The vegetables at the time were not what you see in the store. We've had 12,000 years of farming and crossbreeding. The fruits that you see are bigger, sweeter, and faster growing. This is not the normal fruit that you would find 15,000 years ago. So ultimately...
Joel, I want to stick with your story, just because I got a couple more questions about that journey, right? I want to know, as a medical professional 7 years ago, you hear about D. There are a couple of studies, and what level of apprehension did you have moving into it? What were your views prior, and what did you expect to happen reaching for that bottle of D when you started on that journey?
Right. Well, like most people, I thought I got my vitamin D from milk because it's in there, and the RDA is 600 international units, and a multivitamin has 600 or even sometimes 1,000. And I didn't pay any attention. I didn't know what international units was. I knew what milligrams were because I'm a doctor. And the truth was that I really didn't know. As I started to supplement, now I had listened to all of Stasha Gomenak's material, and I went and got a vitamin D test. I actually called my doctor and said, "What's my vitamin D level?" He said, "I don't know. I don't care." And then I went and got tested, and I was at 18 nanograms. That was the first vitamin D test that I ever had. I had never supplemented. And when I went in the sun, I always wore sunscreen 50 or 30 because I did not want to get skin cancer. So I didn't really have an idea. And I still remember back to that time, I took 1,000 IU the first day. I took 2,000 the second day. Then I went to 5,000. I'm waiting for some crazy reaction. But keep in mind that I had already done research and I had already sort of seen that there was this discrepancy between what doctors were saying. The international, the limit was supposed to be 4,000 IU was the safe limit. Over that, it was toxic. And unfortunately, because doctors do not learn about vitamin D in medical school at all, other than too much is toxic, they don't know either. And everyone, when you think about vitamin C, you're going to take 500 milligrams or 1,000 milligrams because vitamin C you use up during the day. Vitamin D is very different. And vitamin D has nothing to do with the dose and everything to do with your blood level.
That's precisely what I was going to say. I'll tell you my story into taking vitamin D was to go and see the family doctor and say, look, I've heard vitamin D may help with my cluster headache, and I want to get a blood test. And they said, oh, well, if you want to do that, that's on you. I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, it's not subsidized here. You'll have to go to a lab and organize that. But he said, anyway, let me write you out a script for vitamin D. And sent me on my way. I said, well, I want to take 600,000 international units over 12 days. He said,
it's toxic.
Yeah.
Toxic. You'll kill it. Yeah, let me guess, you got 50,000 international units of vitamin D2.
No, it was so vitamin D3, cholecalciferol, it is subsidized in New Zealand. So if you're over 65 and go and see a doctor, he'll just happily write out a script without. It's kind of shooting dark, right? Like shooting blind. 50,000 international units once per month to stave off osteoporosis in a retirement village type. Type situation, so I was well out on my own with it, and to say I was like a little bit petrified popping that level of vitamin D, like I was, but at the same stage I was getting the attacks daily, so I was in a state of I want to try anything, Troll. Like I was in a bad spot, like a really bad spot, and then lo and behold, like I said, 8 days later, I'm like, mate, I'm ready to go back to the pub, and so I do want to talk about the pillars, the optimal pillars of health, because we're going to talk about nutrition. It's something that's new to me. I've always had, I've been a chef for many years. Like I've eaten poorly, but it's like now what do I go for, mate? Like there's a million fads and a million diets out there that I can choose from. And as a regular everyday kind of bloke, I'm absolutely lost when it comes to, is it keto? Is it Atkins? Should I be buying bacon? How important is organic food? All of this stuff confuses me. And so I want to have a discussion around that. But look, I want to talk about risk profile, because I think it's really important. How risky is it for folks that don't have the support of their family doctor moving in to start taking the level of vitamin D that you're kind of suggesting, 5,000 international units per day?
So what I want to explain, so I've been in this location for 22 years. I had a patient who came in yesterday who I asked him, because I present my patients with a written page on vitamin D, and I say, this is what I recommend. I recommend testing. Please take it with vitamin K2, magnesium. Do not take it without. So I go through this every time. I had a patient who came in and I said, are you taking your vitamin D? And he said, yes. And I said, how much are you taking? He said, 10,000. And I said, 10,000, that seems like a lot. And he said, well, my doctor told me to take that. And I'm kind of smiling inside because I gave him my sheet 7 years ago and he didn't listen to me. And I said to him, are you taking vitamin K2 and magnesium with that? And he said, no. And I said, okay, so I want to understand this. So what happened? My doctor tested my vitamin D and said it was low. So he told me to take 10,000. And I said, so I gave you my vitamin D sheet 7 years ago with specific instructions. And he said, well, yeah, he's my real doctor. He's a medical doctor. And so I'm not insulted. I'm just a dentist and I'm okay with that. And I kind of had to laugh because what I wanted to say was, so this is the guy who never tested your vitamin D for the last 7 years, who's now telling you to take quite a large amount. I was actually impressed that the doctor did that instead of giving the prescription, but he was missing some of the supporting elements. So I was just happy that this guy was on his vitamin D. So just so you understand why I tell this story is that these are trusted patients of mine. They won't go to any other dentist, but they're still fearful to take vitamin D. They'll say, oh, I'm taking vitamin D, but not how much you said. It's in my multivitamin. And I even have a thing on the sheet that says multivitamin has 600 IU. I try and take away all these things I call D's excuses. And people are still quite fearful. So what I want to say is if you can find any single study that's ever shown a single death of vitamin D overdose, I'd like to see it. If you can show me, I have patients who've gone up to over 250 nanograms, which should be toxic, should kill you, and they're all fine because none of them took it without vitamin K2 and magnesium. That's far too high to go, but I know some doctors who like to stay at over 100. I don't. I did a personal experiment just so everyone understands that this is normal, and I want to give you an analogy, but I live in Southern California, and the first time I started experimenting with not taking any supplemental vitamin D, just getting sun exposure, by the end of the summer, my level was at 100 without any supplements. And that's the upper limit that Mother Nature will give you. Once you get to that maximum 100, then your body will no longer make vitamin D and you can never overdose on sunlight. But if I was taking supplements, I could overdose. But to let you know that even when you take too much vitamin D, if you go in the sun, sunlight will break it down because your body knows exactly how much it wants. So even to those who are fearful, there are no massive deaths over vitamin D deficiency. All that you get with vitamin D is health and happiness. And there are millions of people dying around the world because their vitamin D level is too low. And I kind of want to take this opportunity to make people think about this a different way. Now, in the old days, you may be too young to remember this, but if you became dehydrated, you would get nauseous, you could vomit, you could pass out, you'd have cold sweat. They'd take you to the hospital and they'd rehydrate you with an IV with saline, or they'd give you water. And once you drink the water, you feel so much better. Now, imagine if doctors are like, oh my God, that water just revived this person. This water is a miracle drug. We got to give it to everybody. It's going to make them healthier. Because you hear these crazy things about vitamin D, it fixes all these different things. And people say, you know, Joel, you think vitamin D fixes everything. Yeah. And let's turn it upside down. Let's imagine that every single person on this planet is actually vitamin D deficient, and that giving them any amount of vitamin D makes their bodies run better. So I literally think of it as a vitamin D dehydration, because if you were a hunter-gatherer 15,000 years ago, your vitamin D level would be very high because you'd be living outdoors. You wouldn't be in air conditioning. You wouldn't be wearing clothes. If it was cold, you'd be out there in the morning waiting for the sun to come up to warm you up. So this is a chemical that's hardwired into our bodies, and it's only a modern issue that people are so low. So when you raise someone's vitamin D level, it does so many different things that people begin to think, well, it sounds like snake oil. This is just total bullshit, because how could this one thing fix everything? But by the time this podcast is over, I want people to understand why that happens. That's number one. Number two is thinking about cancer. Now, everyone thinks cancer is genetic. It's not, it's environmental. And anyone who doesn't believe me, I've got a great podcast with Dr. Thomas Seyfried, and we talk about that. I can go into further details, but cancer is environmental. And if you look at all the studies, what you're going to see is that all these people with diseases, they have really low vitamin D, and the doctors are like, well, we don't know whether the disease lowered the vitamin D or vice versa. And I can tell you this, is that you're never going to find anyone on this planet, not one single human on this planet, that's ever had an initial diagnosis of cancer and a high vitamin D level. Those two factors, they never coincide. The vitamin D level goes down and it allows cancer to progress. Now, there is no other chemical that I can think of on this planet that you can measure in your blood that's related to cancer under any circumstances. And why, when you go to the doctor, the first thing they don't do is say, hey, let's get a vitamin D level on you. What are you supplementing? The idea that they don't do that, it's linked to cancer, is so irrefutable that it's shocking. This is the one thing that you can do to ensure the prevention of cancer, period. And anyone who doubts that, I don't blame you, because everyone thinks that cancer is genetic. Big Pharma tells you that it is, but they also make billions of dollars on cancer treatment. And they know all about vitamin D because they've tried to make an analog apparently 70, 80 times. They can't make a chemical that does what vitamin D does because it's very specific. So the idea that there's something that you could monitor that can absolutely prevent cancer and that no one's paying attention is actually grotesque. And to anyone who's had breast cancer or cancer of any kind, I can assure you that that initial diagnosis, if they measured your blood, you'd probably be below 10 nanograms because that's what I see.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So I mean, Joel, that's, you know, like playing the devil's advocate a little bit here. As a guy that loves, mate, when I came over to California, there's an in and out. I mean, what beautiful burgers that place does. But, you know, like, don't think you can sit at home watching your favorite soap opera, dialing in Uber Eats, Big Macs, and take your 10,000 international units per day and not get crook. And, you know, because that's not going to happen either. But I want to talk about the levels here in New Zealand. Now, when I tested before taking vitamin D, I was 21 nanograms per milliliter, and my goal was 80 to get the headaches to stop. My sister, one of them was very similar. Her husband similar. My other sister, who spends a lot of time in the sun, eats well, is into yoga, her level was 80 off the bat without any supplementation. So really interesting stuff. But the mean vitamin D level of the average New Zealander is 24 nanograms per milliliter. Now, when I was reading the preview to your book, you talk about, and I think it's great. I want you to explain a little bit more. Human power saving mode. Yeah. What is it? And talk to me from the aspect of knowing the average Kiwi's got 24 nanograms per milliliter in their tank.
Sure. Well, so I like to always give you an idea of why this would be important. So, you know, when you've got your phone, you've had a busy day, and that little thing comes up, it says low battery, 20%, and it says power saving mode. So what your phone is doing is it's shutting down all non-essential functions and saying, hey, you better plug this phone back in or it's going to die. Now, some of the things it shuts down that may be running in the background, maybe you're okay without them. But you can see from my diagram there, I wanted to have a really great graphic that would make sense to people that vitamin D and sunlight is actually a battery in your body. And just like when your phone goes down to 20%, your body will do the same thing, except that no warning will pop up saying that you're at, I like to compare it to 20 nanograms. And if you see the graphics in my book, which is free and available online, I did a thermostat, and I call it the thermostat of life. And it's a really good way to think about what your vitamin D status is like. So 20 is the bare minimum. No one should ever be below 20. That's considered deficient almost everywhere, all right? And you don't want your phone to be below 20%. When you get up to 32, now I live in the US, so 32 is freezing. So I consider anything below 32 nanograms is winter. So, and everything above 32 is more in the summer zone, maximum at 100. But with your phone, if you don't plug it back in, it's going to die. And it's the same thing with your body. If you do not plug in to the energy of the sun on some level, whether it's supplements or getting sunshine, you are going to basically die as well. But it's going to be a long, drawn out death of modern chronic inflammatory disease that your doctor is going to say is genetic. And that's the world that we're stuck in. So I want you to understand that how this happened was something that happened in the 1930s. And we had a division of medicine. We went around the big pharma route, the genetic route versus the epigenetic route. So basically, the powers that be in the 30s decided that big pharma was going to be the way that we were going to work, and we were going to ignore the environment. And, you know, back in those days, they didn't even have antibiotics, so we can't necessarily blame them. But the biggest thing that happened was prior to the invention of antibiotics in the early 1940s, there was no antibiotics. People who had tuberculosis, which is a bacterial skin and lung infection, the cure was to go to a sunny climate and lie in the sun. And in my book, I have pictures of people lying in hospital beds in the sun. That was how they reversed tuberculosis. And you'll notice that now with those medications, they always warn you, tell your doctor if you have tuberculosis. And why would that be related? Well, low vitamin D will result in bacterial and viral infections because vitamin D runs your antimicrobial and your immune system. And so not understanding this, how the whole thing got started, this is a chunk of information got taken out of medicine. Imagine if your doctor went to medical school and never learned about the heart. They said, oh, we don't care about the heart. This is a hormone that affects almost every tissue in your body, and it's profound. And I'll tell you that the key features of why it's so important. Number one, it regulates the gut microbiome and every microbiome of your body. And there's more than the gut microbiome. There's the lung, the mouth, you name it, even the brain. It regulates the sleep cycle, and it regulates the immune system. Those are three very powerful things that affect so many things. And, according to Stasha Gomenak, if you don't sleep right, and I believe in this, then you can't be healthy if you don't restore your body every night. And if you don't have enough vitamin D, you're absolutely not sleeping properly.
And yeah, so there's a couple of parts that I'm going to pick up with you regarding sleep and some commentary and feedback that I've heard. But it's a really nice analogy. Now, I guess it really begs the question then, Joel. Once you get above 32 nanograms per milliliter, and you've got a tank there, why should you be concerned that, maybe you're not sitting more closer to having a full tank? Suffice to say, having 30, which is, verging on needing to stop by the gas station again, and beyond which I'm sure 95% of folks, I know that my mum's circle of friends, if you ask them, they would just say, well, if you take too much, it's just going to turn into expensive urine and out the other side anyway, which I know the viewers watching this will know is no longer the case. But I tell you what, that sentiment still exists. So talk to me about the range of what optimal looks like. How do we actually know?
Sure. Well, so just to be able to answer that question, I want to explain one of the main functions of vitamin D in how it regulates your DNA. And even though you probably have a very educated audience, what I want to really explain is that inside your body, you have your DNA. This is half from your mother, half from your father. And what your DNA is, it's your blueprint to make all of the chemicals that your body needs to be healthy. Now, we primarily make something called enzymes. Enzymes are literally little nanobots, little micromechanical machines that circulate in your body and perform all kinds of functions. If you need anything done in your body, it's done by an enzyme. And what enzymes are very unique. Now, we make these enzymes literally from copying our own DNA. And where this is related to vitamin D is that vitamin D is required at a specific level to allow you to open your DNA for copying. Vitamin D itself, when it activates a cell, literally goes to the DNA and picks out exactly which genes it wants to open up and copy. And that gene is actually an instruction to make an enzyme. So once you understand that, we can test these different enzymes. And the studies that have been done found that it's not until 42 or 44 nanograms, somewhere in that range, that the enzymes that they measure are all measurable. So past 42, 45, that's when your body technically has enough, when you measure it, to be making all of the enzymes required. Now, most people still don't find that that's enough. And for the average person, having a level over 40 might be fine. If you have perfect health and you're fit, you're not obese, you have no medical problems, keeping a level of 40 or 45 may be just fine for you, but everyone is different. And there's a huge amount of variation between people in their vitamin D receptors, number one. Number two is there's a lot of factors that can affect how you produce vitamin D. Even if you're taking a ton of it, there's some factors that we'll discuss that can really affect how it's made, because there's an enzyme that activates vitamin D initially in your liver, and there's another enzyme that activates it in your kidney. And these enzymes, if they're not being made, you're not going to activate your vitamin D. You can take all you want, but no doctor will be able to measure it, because that vitamin D is a completely different chemical than what they're looking for. It's the actual vitamin D molecule, cholecalciferol. and we want to have the activated form. The enzyme hydroxylates or adds a hydroxyl group onto it to make it active, to make it the storage form. And then so that's the storage form that's around in your body. And if you don't have enough vitamin D in storage form, you cannot make the active form, which is the 125 version. You don't need to know any about that stuff, but your body will selectively upregulate the activation of vitamin D to the active form wherever it needs to, but only if you have enough in the storage form. And it's as simple as that. So until you get to 40,
oh yeah, I've got some good information that I think is going to just pull this out and build it for people so they get a really good understanding. Now, people will have seen my previous podcast with Pete Batchelor, and he uses a term that you're talking about in terms of genetic translation, and he stated, he called it opening the book of life. And you know, I really resonates with me, but most people, that's going to go over their head. So I want to pull up on the screen and just work from the basis that folks watching this have an understanding that how they make vitamin D and how it is stored and what they're measuring when they get a test. Now, what you're looking at up on screen, of course, is the traditional pathway that Joel has just talked about, whether it's subcutaneously via the skin or via a supplement or in the diet. The liver adds a hydroxyl group to carbon position 25. That's the storage form that we're measuring when we get a test. Now, what I wanted to tease out with Joel and show you guys at home is my underlying question around this is that we see here in the kidneys another hydroxyl group is added to carbon position 1, but producing 125 OH2D. Now, this is the active form of vitamin D, but this form of vitamin D is not the form that's entering the neurons in my brain to stop the cluster headache. This form is used in the regulation of calcium and phosphorus in the bloodstream and the renal system. Now, what I've also got up on screen, and this is where I really want to ask you, Joel, and you may or may not have the answer, I don't know, but we know that the storage form of vitamin D is bound with what's called vitamin D binding protein, and it travels around the bloodstream. Now, up on screen for the folks at home is a picture of what happens next. Now, Joel, I really want you to just tease this out and talk to us so people understand what is the book of life. Is there a bit of DNA in every single one of our cells? And how does this work here?
Right. So every single cell in your body has the exact same copy of the DNA. This is your blueprint. Now, different cells will go to that DNA and go to different parts of it. A cell that's in your liver will go to a very specific part of the DNA and open that up and copy all those instructions, which will be very different from a blood vessel cell called an endothelial cell, which will be looking at a very different area of the DNA. And that's what the specialization of the cells in our body is. When you get a special cell that comes from your bone marrow, it's undifferentiated and the entire DNA is available for copying. When that cell finds where it's going to land, whether it's in your brain or your muscle, those local conditions will start to tell the DNA, shut down this part, we don't need that, shut down this part, open this part. This is a part we really need because we're going to make skin cells, and this is really important. This is the instruction to copy for this type of cell, like a fibroblast is going to make fiber all the time. It's going to have a very different part of the DNA it's going to open to copy. So every single cell has exactly that same blueprint, and it's all twisted up. The parts that are opened up are the parts that that cell uses on a regular basis.
It's kind of like having like a hotel with like 1,000 rooms, and in each of the rooms, you'll find a copy of the instructions to build the whole hotel. But you really only want to look at the bits of machinery that relate to room 202 that you're staying in, for example. But of course, we have a few more cells than 1,000, right, Joel? There's literally trillions and trillions of them. So, so that's what it looks like. Now, when we're talking about a vitamin D level, like...
Hold on. sorry, I hate to interrupt, but this is the perfect time to explain this. So this DNA information is really critical to our health because we make all these enzymes, but the DNA of our microbes that we carry in our guts mostly outnumbers our DNA 100 to 1. So our DNA is not even that important compared to our microbes. So the bacteria that you have, their DNA outnumbers ours 100 to 1. So those microbes are much more important than anyone's thinking because we rely on those chemicals and we have always relied on them to make so many different things. And vitamin D regulates the gut microbiome and all microbiomes specifically. So when that vitamin D level comes up and changes the gut microbiome, it really changes an incredible amount of chemicals that are being made by your bugs, by your actual bacteria that you have. So that's a really important part to say, because now that we've sort of teased out that we copy the DNA to make specific things, we really rely on our microbiomes really for all that stuff, much more than our own DNA. It's kind of shocking. Okay, so sorry to interrupt you. I hope that
I mean, that's outrageous. What was the stat? 20 to 1?
No, 100 to 1.
100 to 1.
100 to 1.
And they're all using vitamin D synergistically together to produce, constituents that we in turn need to survive. And I think, for folks that have watched Dasha Gomek's keynotes, that concept is really going to land with them. Now, I wanted to share with you again, looking at it from the aspect of my fellow New Zealanders sitting at home with 24 nanograms of vitamin D in their tank, and sticking with the genetic regulation piece. There's this the paper in the journal Nature, scientific reports looking at genomic activity versus dosage, which I thought, well, what a great time to just bring this up on screen, because it really offers some insight into this. We could have a look at this now. In fact, I'll put it up on screen for us to take a look at. I think that'll be there. No, that's not the one I want to bring up. This one here. Actually, I've got the abstract. Up on screen for you. 30 healthy adults randomized to receive 600, 4,000 or 10,000 international units of vitamin D daily for 6 months. Circulating PTH, parathyroid hormone, calcium, and white blood cells, broad gene expressions were evaluated. We observed a dose-dependent increase in 25-OHD vitamin D concentrations, decreased parathyroid hormone, and no change in serum calcium in any of those groups that were taking vitamin D. But what they did see, there was a dose-dependent alteration in broad gene expression with 162, 320, and 1,289 genes respectively, based on whether they were taking 600, 4,000, or 10,000 international units of vitamin D. So the offshoot of that is, if they're not having those genes influenced by the expression of vitamin D, what's the consequence, Joel?
Well, the consequence is being stuck in human power saving mode. So basically, your body, if you've never had a vitamin D level over 30 or 25, you've never given your body the raw material to actively create every chemical that it was designed to have. And I want to just sort of put this out there, that people's vitamin D level, it's incidental, it's accidental, because you're not managing it. And you're not managing it because your doctor doesn't know about it and doesn't care about it, but you should. So having that low level, that's happened because you're not paying attention to it. It doesn't mean that you want that level or that level is good for you. It's just happened because doctors have been brainwashed that vitamin D is not important and too much is toxic. So 100%. I live most of my life in human power saving mode. And again, just the relief of pain that I had, it was kind of mind blowing. So when you don't access all of your genes, and again, now you know that bacterial aspect to it. So I never had the right gut microbiome. That's why I had Crohn's disease. And when I raised my vitamin D level, one of the things that happened was finally every single cell in my body had enough power to do whatever my genes had. I could bring out any enzyme that I needed to because I finally had the right level. But not only that, the bacteria that function at that higher level, those are the bacteria of health. Those are the bacteria that humans who live outdoors in the sunlight have normally. And what people are walking around with, why there's so much IBS and all these issues, is that everyone's level is too low. And it's too low because they're literally suffering from vitamin D dehydration, because this is not a part of your doctor's interest. And it's as simple as that.
I mean, most folks wouldn't even know that vitamin D is associated with osteoporosis and rickets, which are diseases at severe ends of the deficiency scale. Now, while you're talking about the microbiome, it's probably a pertinent time to then bring it up and say, we've been introduced to just a slither, I guess, of the importance of the B group vitamins in previous podcasts. And, if you follow social media channels talking about supplements, very quick to start talking about vitamin B12 and energy levels. Now, again, linked in the description, here's a beautiful paper, vitamin D and its target genes. I think you read this, Joel. It's a lot to get your head around, but it just succinctly covers vitamin D in a very clinical, scientific way that's very thorough. Now, an excerpt here that says the ubiquitous expression of the VDR gene supports findings obtained during the past 30 years. Vitamin D regulates not only calcium homeostasis, but also immunity, as Joel has alluded to, cell growth and differentiation, as well as energy metabolism. Boy, gee, I could sure deal with a bit more energy, Joel. and so I'm really interested now for you to introduce me to this fella, Marty Mitochondria. I've put the little cartoon image up on screen. Can you start to explain to me vitamin D energy metabolism a little bit more, because I have not exposed myself to this aspect.
Sure. Okay. This is a good time for you to put on the screen the cover of my book, The Modern Epidemic. And what you'll be able to see right away, first of all, the image is a wave coming over a surfer. And that wave has all the corporate logos. And that surfer is us. We are that hunter-gatherer. And that corporate wave is basically trying to take us out. But what you'll notice is the words, the modern epidemic. You've got a D stacked directly on top of another D, and two Ds make a B. So that's the easiest way to remember this, is that having more vitamin D gives you more B vitamins. Now, you can also see from my B vitamin poster there, what does the caption say? It says, "We are everywhere." All right. Now, there are 8 B vitamins, and I call them Mother Nature's helpers. These B vitamins are the result of our gut bacteria. They were always made by our gut bacteria, and you can get them from food, but our gut bacteria is what we have to produce those vitamins. And if you have the right gut microbiome, you're going to make all of those B vitamins, okay? They all have a bacterial source. This is irrefutable. But what is it that makes those bacteria make these B vitamins? It's having the right conditions, whether it's the right food, eating the right types of food, and just simply having a vitamin D. So 2 Ds make a B. The B vitamins are instrumental in so many different chemical reactions. They are cofactors. Hopefully you can show some of my enzymes. Enzymes, like we already talked about, are Mother Nature's nanobots. They are micro mechanical machines that do all of the reactions in your body. B vitamins are cofactors. So all these enzymes, a lot of them need a cofactor, and most of the cofactors are vitamins and minerals, specifically magnesium and B vitamins. So B vitamins, they're all these different chemicals that all fit together. Half of this one gets broken down for this enzyme, and there's such a diverse interplay that this is so kind of hard to separate. Mother Nature doesn't make mistakes, and she's smart. She's not going to make you take in 30 different vitamins if she can get everything out of a smaller amount. And that's what we did. We and all animals evolved to have these vitamins made in our guts. And I kind of want to digress here, because this is going to lead to a lot of the what's needed for health. So back in the old days, before animals existed, plants have their roots in the soil. In that soil, that's where the bacteria are. And in case of plants, these bacteria are producing the vitamins that the plants need to grow. Now, as humans evolved, or as animals evolved, the big change was a molecule called cholesterol. Now, prior to cholesterol, no plants have cholesterol. So if you're a vegan or a plant-based diet, it's bad news. Plants do not contain cholesterol. As plants produced oxygen, the atmosphere changed, and oxygen is very corrosive. You know, it rusts, it can combust. And so the certain cells started to develop a sturdier fat to protect themselves from this oxygen. And that fat was cholesterol. Cholesterol is a molecule of fat. It's very unique. And this molecule is what was required to make our cell walls into cell membranes, so they're fluid and you can have muscles and nerves. Plants are too rigid. They can't run. They don't have muscles. They don't move around on the planet. What was required for plants to transform to animals was the evolution of this very special molecule called cholesterol. And hopefully you can show my cartoon character for Kathy cholesterol.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, and you'll notice that she has a crown and a tool belt, because cholesterol is your mini repair person. And she is the queen of the hydrophobes. Cholesterol is terrified of water, okay? And this will become more important when you understand that a lot of people probably listening to this are on cholesterol statins because they think their cholesterol is too high. But what I want you to understand is that cholesterol is actually a hero and not a villain. You want cholesterol. Your brain is loaded with cholesterol. Your nerves are full of cholesterol. Your muscles are full of cholesterol. Cholesterol is what holds your body together. And it's specifically anyone who's a physicist, anyone sort of van der Waals forces, these are weak forces that are in different molecules. And the way that cholesterol is laid out, it's a very unique molecule. It's so interesting that it actually holds everything together and allows for the fluidity, the production of the myelin sheath on your neurons, brain tissue, and your heart. And the reason I drew Kathy cholesterol with that tool belt is that this is your starter molecule that your body produces primarily in your liver, but you can get it from food. And this is the chemical that's supposed to go out through your entire circulatory system to plug up leaks and to restore tissues that are very active, like your heart. Your heart's beating 24/7. How do you repair it? Because even when you sleep, your heart's beating. Cholesterol is pushed into any areas that are starting to leak. And so this is your main repair molecule, but it's a fat, so it's terrified of water. Now, one thing you haven't necessarily heard of, and I don't know, you can correct me, is something called vitamin D sulfate. Have you heard of that before?
No.
Well, this is a different form of vitamin D that does not require vitamin D binding protein. So you know about vitamin D binding protein, but what's it all about? Well, vitamin D is hydrophobic. It cannot go in your blood on its own. So it's bound to a protein that's hydrophilic, that likes water. And that's why we have vitamin D binding protein, because vitamin D is very hydrophobic. However, when you attach a specific chemical to cholesterol or vitamin D, especially it's sulfur or sulfate, you bond these together, you get either vitamin D sulfate or cholesterol sulfate. Sulfur is very hydrophilic. And if you show my character of sulfur, you'll see he's got a crown and a shield, and he's the king of the hydrophiles. So he basically is in charge of all the aqueous parts of your body. All your cells and your blood is filled with water, but your cell membranes, those are all fats, and fat and water don't mix. You've seen that oil and water don't mix. You got to shake up your salad dressing. Well, what your body was designed to do was to take sulfur and attach it to cholesterol, vitamin D, dopamine, serotonin, neurotransmitters of every kind, because these chemicals are all afraid of water. They need to have some way to get transported. So vitamin D, all these chemicals will get bonded to specifically sulfur, sulfate, it's a form of sulfur. And now we have a product that can go in your blood and can go into your cell membranes. This is a very unique idea, because not only does this sulfur attach to these chemicals, but it inactivates them. So when you have these chemicals flowing around your body, they should be sulfated so they are not active. Once that sulfur gets taken off, now you have an active hormone. And this is a completely new concept that one of my gurus, Dr. Stephanie Seneff, I've interviewed her many times, and I created my cartoon characters to share this story. So how does sulfur get connected with vitamin D or cholesterol? Well, there's an enzyme called endothelial nitric oxide synthase, or eNOS for short. You can see it's a cute enzyme, it's yellow. And I created it with a little hatch in the back, and that hatch is the actual cofactor. So this enzyme has two arms, I drew my enzymes with robot arms to either put things together or pull them apart. Some enzymes need a cofactor, and in this case, the cofactor of endothelial nitric oxide synthase is sunlight. And that's why not going into the sun is dangerous. This is a solar-powered reaction that only happens when photons from the sun come and strike this enzyme. It can make one of two products. It can make nitric oxide, which I know you've heard about before. Nitric oxide is a vasodilator, but it can also make cholesterol sulfate. And it depends. Those are its two products, and they're both made in sunlight, okay? So when you go in the sun, all of your blood vessels dilate and the blood rushes up to the surface to receive sunlight because your blood and your body is a solar-powered battery. Of course, we utilize sunlight because we are further down the evolutionary chain than plants. We didn't get rid of all the things that sunlight does for plants. We just got a mitochondria instead of a chloroplast. And we utilize sunlight directly. You actually get the photons when they strike your body. They will literally elevate the electrons through something called the photoelectric effect. And you absorb that energy. All that energy comes in and it's stored in the water in your body. So your body is actually a battery. So this is a lot of new information. This is why I created cartoon characters, because this can be hard to get your mind around. So keep in mind that every reaction in your body is done by an enzyme. Some enzymes need a cofactor. Now, when it comes to vitamin K2, that is required by your body to activate two enzymes that bind calcium. So I say never take vitamin D without vitamin K2. Why? Once you bring in the calcium, that calcium now is looking to get into your teeth and your bones. So this is perfect for me because I'm a dentist, and your gums are supported by the periodontium, which is bone, and your teeth are full of calcium. Now, if you want to get the calcium that you just absorbed is now in your bloodstream, you want to get that calcium into teeth and bones, you have to have a specific enzyme. One's called osteocalcin, and one is called matrix GLA protein. These enzymes are vitamin K2 dependent, meaning that if you don't have vitamin K2, they're just sitting around texting each other saying, hey, what's up? Nothing, I'm bored. Once you have vitamin K2 in your body, it will activate these enzymes to put calcium into your bones. When it comes to endothelial nitric oxide synthase, its cofactor is sunlight. It will not act without sunlight. And this is a really profound finding, and no one's paying attention to it because I'm going to tell you about cholesterol sulfate, because it's one of the most important chemicals your doctor's never heard anything about. And you can see in my cartoon characters, you're going to see Kathy cholesterol, queen of the hydrophobes, and sulfur, king of the hydrophiles, and they get together and they make cholesterol sulfate. And I have the image you haven't seen yet of sulfur. He's got his little goggles on. He's driving a motorcycle, and cholesterol is in the sidecar. And this is your transporter. So if you look at my poster for sulfur, you'll see he's the ultimate transporter. This is a molecule designed to deliver hormones and chemicals around your body. And this is a delivery system that Mother Nature and the laws of physics in this universe created as part of our biology. So it's a whole different understanding. And keep in mind, these things are irrefutable. When I heard about this, I thought, Stephanie Seneff, I don't know if I believe her. And all the research is there. Go Google cholesterol sulfate, and you're going to see this is a real thing. What does cholesterol sulfate do? Everything. It protects you from cancer. This is the major thing product that we make in the sun. And I want you to think about this. If you do not go in the sun, your body still needs to transport its cholesterol, but now it cannot put cholesterol into your bloodstream because it's hydrophobic. Kathy is terrified of water, okay? So what does it do? It takes that cholesterol and packages it into a boat surrounded by proteins called high density and low density lipoproteins. And all these are nothing other than boats to transport cholesterol. It ferries cholesterol in your body so that it can be delivered. And if you don't go in the sun, your cholesterol levels that your doctor is testing is going to be elevated. And the reason is that you're not making cholesterol sulfate. So now your doctor wants you to lower your cholesterol, even though your dietary cholesterol has nothing to do with your body's level of cholesterol, because the food that you eat, when you eat butter and fatty food and fatty meat, that cholesterol does not go into your arteries. So when you see this buildup of cholesterol that often has calcium plaque on it, what you're really looking at is a deficiency of vitamin K2. What you're really looking at is a broken system. And your body is piling up this cholesterol in your arteries to save you and to repair your heart. Why would coronary arteries get so clogged with cholesterol? Because your body's desperate to repair the heart because it's beating all the time. It needs to have more cholesterol. And because you don't have the right chemical mix to get that cholesterol into those muscles, it's just going to build up there and clog everything. Your body is using those cholesterol buildups to try and pull everything it can to make cholesterol sulfate. So the idea that when you see somebody eating fatty food that it goes into the arteries, this is non-scientific extrapolation and it's nonsense. Okay. So the entire cholesterol paradigm is completely wrong. And if you interfere with the synthesis of cholesterol, it's going to affect your body. Every cell membrane in your body and every muscle is going to say, hey guys, I'm getting kind of weak. I don't have enough cholesterol to fix me. And then you get muscle pain and all kinds of issues happen with being on a cholesterol statin because your body is going to make the same amount whether you eat it or not. Cutting it out of your diet is not going to lower your cholesterol. With those measurements, that low density lipoprotein, that's much more a measurement of how much sugar and carbohydrates you're eating. And the reason that this is all going on is because of money. Cholesterol statins make probably trillions of dollars around the world. And this is just total phony baloney nonsense. A study came out that basically debunked it, that certain doctors don't believe, and because they've been brainwashed. But if you interfere with the synthesis of cholesterol by taking a statin, you're signing an early death sentence. Because the real truth is those who have the highest levels of cholesterol, and what I mean, those who are eating whole foods, not processed foods, non-GMO, healthy meat, ruminants meat, this is a measure of your health because those people who have that higher level of cholesterol, their muscles stay healthier and stronger. Their skin loaded with cholesterol, their neurons stay healthier. You do not want to cut cholesterol. That's why I made Kathy Cholesterol a hero, not a villain. And I think you may have heard her song called I Got Your Back. This is your body's defense mechanism. Whoa. And I want people to know that Kathy Cholesterol has been framed for murder and she's not guilty. She's really got your best interest at heart.
Right. I mean, this is going to be a lot for people to navigate because then it begs the question, well, doc, tell me what to take and I'll take it, right? Like, right. And in terms of the ratio to vitamin D to K2, we can talk about that. In fact, it's probably a good time to talk about that. Now, I follow a lot of vitamin D groups, and I'm going to put up on the screen some comments that I get time and time again. Like you'll see them consistently. Those who take large amounts of vitamin D, how do you stop the side effects? I'm supposed to take 50,000 international units weekly, but every time I take it, I become very fatigued and get a tummy ache. Now, there's the question, Joel. So I guess it does beg the question. Some people start taking vitamin D and feel absolutely amazing. Some people take it like this lady here, and she feels terrible. What denotes how people respond, how they feel?
Okay. So the first two obvious things are if you're not taking vitamin D with vitamin K2 and magnesium, all bets are off. Heart palpitations, all kinds of weird symptoms. If you're taking an appropriate dose of magnesium and vitamin K2, in my opinion, there are no side effects to taking vitamin D other than health, happiness, and longevity. Okay. Now I'm going to tell you a story. Patient comes in to me and says, doc, I can't take that vitamin D. I took it and it gave me diarrhea. And I say, okay, so let's talk about that day. What did you have for lunch? Oh, I went to the Golden Corral. Well, that's a buffet. I'm like, okay, so you took this little pill that you took and you had diarrhea and you were sure it was the vitamin D, and yet you went to a buffet. How is it exactly that you're sure it was the vitamin D that gave you the runs? What is it that makes you think that? Just because someone thinks something doesn't make it true at all. The people who are complaining about these symptoms, they're probably still quite vitamin D deficient. And just because someone says these things, the mind is very powerful. And from a physiologic perspective, again, if you're not taking those other cofactors, sure, you could have some weird effects. But every one of these stories, most people will never have a bad reaction to vitamin D. For those that say they do, I don't have a physiologic explanation for it. They could have an allergy to the oil that it's in. They could have had a bad hamburger. There could be so many different things. if you are going to do a study to see whether vitamin D causes side effects, you're going to have to isolate somebody and give everybody exactly the same food and the same conditions to be able to decide this. So there's way too many wild cards in what people are doing during their day. It may be something so unrelated. So I won't discount that people feel that way. I find it doubtful because vitamin D is something you'd be getting every day going out in the sun. Yeah, so that's my opinion. Now, someone out there, I'm knowledgeable in a certain area of vitamin D. Someone may have a very good explanation. Now, according to Stasha Gomenek, some people are very sensitive to vitamin D. If they take too much, their levels come up very quickly. Maybe it's those people who are experiencing this. I can't really tell you. But the other feature that I do want to talk about back to the B vitamins is I consider the B vitamins to be the fuel for the revving engine. And when you raise your vitamin D level, you need more B vitamins, and not everybody can make them. So Stasha Gomenek always recommends supplementation of a B50, all 8 B vitamins at 50 milligrams to help restore the gut microbiome. Someone like myself, doesn't matter what I do, I have to take extra B vitamins or else I'm in trouble. And if I don't, I will get eczema, psoriasis, joint pain, and psoriatic arthritis. So if anyone listening to this has any of those 4 things, you'll know that's a B vitamin deficiency. And I'm going to say that like it's true because it is. And I had eczema and psoriasis for 1.5 years that disappeared when I raised my B vitamins. And it disappeared within 2 days. I had psoriatic arthritis. I had to have my elbow drained from the swelling. And all it was a B vitamin deficiency. So those people who have that weird effect, if they don't add a B50 complex or maybe even B100 complex, they're going to have some weird symptoms. And those symptoms are going to be B vitamin deficiencies. And those will play out differently depending on your genetic background.
So similarly, though, taking too many B vitamins can also present with some challenges. So how do folks actually know? I guess it really just comes down to how do you feel. But that, look,
what I want to say is that if you've been very sick for a long time, you're going to need more B vitamins, and that's just the way it is. If you're a relatively healthy person, you're not going to need to supplement your B vitamins maybe more than 3 months. But what I see, and the big issue is that we'll talk about the diet. I notice that all of my patients are requiring more and more B vitamins every year. And that's because the microbiome is getting crushed year after year, and our B vitamin production is going down. So for some people, taking too many, if you've been a healthy person, taking too many B vitamins can make you kind of overstimulated. I've never experienced that. But the interesting part has to do with acetylcholine. Especially, so B5 is the precursor to acetylcholine. This is Stasha Gomenek's work. And what you need to know about acetylcholine is it has 2 effects. One is excitatory and one is inhibitory. And I don't even think she knows what makes a difference. So taking too many B vitamins can be very helpful, or it can get you overstimulated. Too much acetylcholine at the wrong time can give you a very different result. Acetylcholine is going to give you that rest and digest setting in the evening, but during the day, acetylcholine will improve your focus. So this is a very complex system. So some people will find taking B vitamin gives them agitation. And for a lot of people, not having enough B vitamins can prevent them from sleeping. Very interesting is bruxism, clenching and grinding. So anyone who has bruxism, it's a primary vitamin D deficiency with a secondary B vitamin deficiency. So for a lot of kids, you'll hear them grinding their teeth in their sleep. And I'm sure people listening to that will have a child. And if you ask your dentist, they'll say, why is my child making this horrible noise? They're grinding their teeth. And the doctor says,
it's a horrible noise, hey, Joel. Like, it's really hard, painful to listen to someone grind like that in their sleep.
What could be the advantage to that? Mother Nature would never have us do that, all right? So when you give a child who grinds very loudly, give them vitamin D, they will stop grinding as little as 2 or 3 days. Now, think about this. What does it do? Well, it immediately raises the gut microbiome in the child. This child is young. It's got a very good immune system. So quite quickly, we'll see literally snoring will stop. Snoring is a vitamin D deficiency. Bruxism will stop. Bruxism is a vitamin D deficiency. Now, if you're grinding your teeth during the day, and I used to clench my teeth during the day, I always catch myself clenching, that means your vitamin D level is really rock bottom. Now, if you raise your vitamin D level, most people's bruxism for sure during the daytime will disappear, but it still happens at night. And what does that mean? Well, at nighttime, you need more B vitamins to control your airway. The part of the brain that regulates sleep and breathing controls the jaw and the airway. That's the part that gets broken when you have all these different diseases. And bruxism is a symptom that not everybody has, but almost everybody. I don't know if it's happening in New Zealand. I would bet that it is. All of my patients wear grinding guards. And when I ask them, do you grind your teeth? They say, oh no, I'm fine. I wear a grinding guard. And I say, I want to say, I didn't ask you if you wear a grinding guard. I asked you if you grind your teeth, because putting a grinding guard in, it will save your teeth from being destroyed. It will stop you from getting massive TMJ headaches and cluster headaches, but it's not the root cause. It doesn't cure bruxism. Bruxism is a B vitamin deficiency secondary to that vitamin D deficiency. And in some people, the bruxism is profound. I found a study that I will forward to you, and you can post this, is that they found that people who brux their teeth, they have a specific SNP, single polynucleotide deletion. So they're just genetically a little different. And so people who really grind a lot, so not everybody who has low vitamin D and low B vitamins grinds all the time, but it's getting more common because, again, our gut microbiome is being destroyed. But certain people who are genetically predispositioned to do more grinding based on their own DNA. Simple as that.
This is good, because it comes to a point where we'll introduce a term again. A guest of mine had used, and so we'll get to that. Nutrition. Come on, then.
Okay.
Come on, tell the chef where he's gone wrong. But Pete Batchelor, again, my previous guest, he came up with a protocol for treating cluster headache, and he's got some very firm views around a ketogenic diet and keeping it as organic as possible, alongside maintaining an optimal vitamin D level. That's the regimen in a nutshell, alongside drinking enough water. Now, he was the one that introduced me to this term. He talked about cluster headache being a genetotrophic disorder. Now, it's a big word, and when I first heard about it, I was confused as hell, but in my experience, this is absolutely true. So a definition for folks that don't know what it is: a genetotrophic disease is one which occurs if a diet fails to provide a sufficient supply of one or more nutrients required. And this is what you're talking about, Joel, right? And around bruxism, is that the body is not getting what it needs, and some folks with single nucleotide polymorphisms, SNPs, are likely to present with bruxism, whereas for me, I present with cluster headache. Now, the idea that you were born with something, it never resonates with me. I was not born with cluster headache. You weren't born with Crohn's and your health challenges. And so for the most part, I have to take some responsibility. That cluster headache was my own making. Do you think that your challenges are the same? It was your way of life. You did it to yourself?
Well, so yes and no. So first of all, the blame lies with the medical system and the doctors, because when I got into the vitamin D literature, I was disgusted that my doctors could have cared less. But I want to bring back Marty mitochondria, because this is where the ketogenic diet comes in. And I'm going to give you the backstory that's going to explain what you should eat, and you can decide on your own. So first of all, I told you that if you went to a grocery store 20,000 years ago, you'd find none of the stuff that you see on the shelves. So that's the first problem. Why does a ketogenic diet work? Well, there's a couple of very specific reasons, but I want to go back to the mitochondria. Now, imagine that you have this beautiful brand new house with all the latest gadgets and an alarm system, and it's got built-in coffee maker, and you've got all this fantastic stuff. And you move into this beautiful house, and one by one, these appliances start to break down and nothing's really working. And then you call the repairman out, and the repairman's like, I don't know, I tried to fix it. But the root cause of all the glitches of all your beautiful little electrical appliances is the power supply coming into the house is a loose cable. And so none of these appliances are getting the energy level that they were designed to be run on. And that's exactly what's happening with every single modern chronic disease. It's related to your mitochondria. Almost all modern diseases are mitochondrial in origin, because your mitochondria produces power on a second-by-second basis. And if every single cell in your body cannot produce enough power, it's going to start to go on the fritz. It's going to not function properly. And when those are neurons that doesn't have enough energy, you're going to get cluster headaches. If it's a gut cell you're going to get Crohn's disease. So every single cell has to have a supply of power. And in your body, that power is something called ATP adenosine triphosphate. I call it human electricity. Okay. This is basically the power of every single animal on this planet uses this little rechargeable battery that gets charged up inside the mitochondria. And when you look at the mitochondria, you see that little lightning bolt. That's the inner mitochondrial membrane. And what that is, you'll see those little round things. There's little motors that spin. And those motors, this invention, the mitochondria, was what allowed for multicellular life. A single cell organism uses fermentation, the burning of sugar, to produce ATP. It's okay, but it's not enough to give you enough power. The creation of the mitochondria was required to allow for multicellular life. And what a mitochondria is a bacteria that got engulfed by another cell. And once that bacteria got in there, it said, hey, I like it in here. This is safe and warm. If you give me food, I will make energy for you. And that's something called endosymbiosis. This is the first stage of multicellular life because it was a win-win situation. The little bacteria on the inside was like, phew, it was cold out there. I don't like that. And the actual bacteria that engulfed it was like, well, now I got all this extra power. And the mitochondria is such a genius invention. The little spinning rotors, that is Mother Nature's universal power plant for every form of life. And every bit of energy in your body and every animal and even plants on this planet, without ATP, there is no life. So the machine that created ATP is essential for all life. And that is inside your mitochondria. Every cell in your body has 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. If you have a heart cell, it's got way more mitochondria. Why? Because your heart's beating like crazy. You need more energy. You have a brain cell, brain cells have more mitochondria. And mitochondria are little tiny decentralized power plants that is attached to cables and pulleys in your cells. And if your body needs them somewhere, it will say, oh, well, we have a power drain in sector 6. Your body will literally migrate mitochondria over to the area to release all this power. And that's why I created Marty Mitochondria. He's in charge of your body. If you do not have enough power in any single cell, your cell isn't going to work properly because nothing can be done. And when it comes to the neurons of your brain, you need ATP, adenosine triphosphate, Mother Nature's electricity, to literally bring the chemicals into the nerves to be able to have proper nerve function. And if you don't have enough ATP, you can't do it. So all health is tied to mitochondrial function. And wouldn't you know that the B vitamins run the mitochondria? Wouldn't you also know that vitamin D is instrumental into how mitochondria function? Google mitochondria, vitamin D, and PubMed, and you'll see study after study that not only is vitamin D required for the proper functioning of a mitochondria, that without enough vitamin D, your body will not be able to go into something called mitophagy, or to be able to get rid of bad mitochondria, because if you don't have that right level of vitamin D, you cannot make a special little cellular thing that will get rid of all the bad stuff. And that gets us into intermittent fasting and something called autophagy. Autophagy is autophagy, self-eating. This is your body's cleanup and repair system. And you can think of it this way, is like, when I was a kid, we used to have a blizzard and we'd have to go get food. If you didn't get enough food, you'd be going to your cupboards, going into what's left in the boxes and cleaning out the last of the cereals and stuff. And that's what your body does when you don't eat. It goes in to whatever is lying around to recycle it and to break it down to feed you until you get to the point where there's nothing left. And you want to get to that point because all the junk that's lying around your body is all the broken down parts. So you want to get into autophagy. If you don't have enough vitamin D, you cannot get into autophagy. You cannot make something called an autophagosome. And you can Google that as well. This is the little structure that will suck up all the bad broken parts in your body. So this is also why vitamin D is associated with cancer. If you don't get rid of all those broken down parts, they're going to cause some problems. Yeah. So I'm sorry I'm giving you so much information, but this is
no.
Yeah, it all fits together. So
that's good. Phagocytosis and everything. Yeah, but no, loving it.
So the B vitamins. Yeah.
But tie that back for me to the benefits of eating keto.
Sure. Okay.
Versus.
So we can divide keto into two phases. Number one, this is the fuel of our bodies. When you eat high fat foods, your body breaks it down into smaller fats. We don't eat carbohydrates. We don't eat those sugars. You've heard of ketones and ketosis. Ketones are very small fat molecules. One of them, beta hydroxybutyrate, butyric acid. That's what's in butter. And that's why butter is very healthy, as long as it's grass-fed butter and not butter that comes from cows that eat GMO, corn, grain, and soy. And right away, that's why going keto makes a massive difference. What is a ketogenic diet? What do you cut out? You cut out all your carbs and your sugar. So you're getting rid of something your body doesn't want in the first place. That burning sugar is like burning gasoline in your hybrid car. You don't want to do it. You want to burn electricity that's clean. And your body is like a hybrid car. Sugar is gas. Fat is electricity. And your body is going to shift back and forth just like a hybrid car. Unless you're feeding your body sugar all day long, you're just going to burn sugar. So when you go on a ketogenic diet, what you do is you cut out all of your carbohydrates, and your body now has to rely on fats. And have you heard of the keto flu?
Yeah.
Well, keto flu is your mitochondria not being able to make enough energy and you feel like crap. And the reason is that you don't have the right enzymes to break down fat yet, because your body has not upregulated them. So when you go on a ketogenic diet, the first thing that happens is your body has to start to make the right enzymes to burn fat, because in the mitochondria, there's two entry points. One is for sugar and one's for fat. Everyone's burning sugar all the time because they're eating all these foods, snacking throughout the day, eating a piece of fruit because they think it's healthy. And instead, your mitochondria is stuck in just sugar burning. You want to get to fat burning, you have to go through a process where your body will upregulate the enzymes that burn fat. And that's why enzymes are so important to understand. So that's just one aspect of it. Number two is glyphosate. You knew we were going to talk about that. Glyphosate is a toxin to your body, and it's found in everything except for grass-fed, grass-finished ruminant animals. If you eat chicken or pork and you don't know what these animals are eating, you're getting glyphosate, unless you get these animals from a regenerative farm where they are not eating GMO foods. And real briefly, there's two types of animals. There's ruminants and there's monogastric animals. Monogastric animals have one stomach, and that's us, that's chicken, that's pork. They eat something, it goes into the digestive system, and that food goes into their tissue and you eat it. So you are what you eat. So if you eat an animal that's eating GMO corn, grain, and soy, and they don't have to tell you that, you're going to get those toxins, and they all come along with glyphosate. Glyphosate destroys the gut microbiome. Glyphosate destroys the neural microbiome. Glyphosate destroys all microbiomes. Why? It's an antibiotic. It kills bacteria. So when you cut out these foods that are processed, you're getting rid of a giant chunk of glyphosate, and all of a sudden, the microbiomes of your body can start to recover because you're not dosing it three meals a day plus 2 snacks, dosing yourself with glyphosate. Glyphosate kills bacteria. That's one of the things that it does. And so this is why a ketogenic diet can be profound. And one special additional aspect is that glyphosate stops your body from activating vitamin D. You can be walking around with a ton of vitamin D in your body, but glyphosate will destroy the enzymes that activate vitamin D. So there are children who have very low vitamin D because doctors are measuring the 25-OHD, the storage form, but when that vitamin D comes into the system, it's got to go to the liver. And the enzymes, the CYP enzyme, and you can show a picture of my CYP enzymes, call them the CYP enzymes. These are the enzymes that hydroxylate vitamin D, and they're found mostly in your liver, but they're found everywhere. And these enzymes get clobbered by glyphosate. It interferes with how they fold. And so now you have this toxin in your body. It's killing the gut microbiome, but not only is it killing the gut microbiome, it's literally stopping the enzymes that activate vitamin D. So when people say, oh, I'm taking vitamin D, but my level's not going up, I can assure you the vitamin D is getting into their body. What's happening is they're on a diet that's so high in glyphosate that the enzymes cannot activate it. And that's why you can't raise people's levels. Those people say my level just won't go up. Aside from obesity and aside from taking the wrong dose, it's glyphosate that will inhibit the production of vitamin D from the active form, from the inactive form to the 25-OH form that you can measure. And these two things are profound. So ketogenic diet is incredibly health promoting. And there's one last aspect, and this is kind of new. This is something.
Just while I've got it, but you've talked about animals with one stomach. What's the benefit of eating animals with multiple stomachs?
Right. Sorry about that. So ruminants are animals with multiple stomach chambers, and they're the ones that are supposed to eat vegetarian and vegan. Animals that graze, eat green growing grass. We don't have the microbiome or the body parts to process that grass. That's why I'm not so big on my stuff, on my vegetables. But these animals were designed to take in this green grass, and they have different stomach chambers to ferment it. They have a completely different profile of microbes, and they will take that cellulose that we can't break down, and they will turn it into protein and fat. And that's why eating ruminants is the only thing that humans should do, unless you're eating a pig that you caught in Italy that's eating acorns. That's a safe pig. And even though it's monogastric, it's eating what it was designed to eat. So that's a safe animal. But these days, when I go out, I only eat red meat because it's very hard to mess up red meat, because ruminants will filter both deuterium and glyphosate. And deuterium is something we haven't talked about yet, but we were designed as humans. We became at the top of the food chain by killing and eating ruminants, animals that eat green growing grass. That's where vitamin K2 comes from as well. And so these animals with these multiple stomach chambers, they filter away all the bad stuff, and what meat that makes it onto their bodies is very clean and very pure. It's the healthiest food on the planet. And that's where I'm going to say something that will have people maybe shutting off this podcast and saying, when I say that red meat, especially fatty red meat, if it's grass-fed, grass-finished, is the single healthiest food on the planet. Why? Because it's the lowest in deuterium. And that's something else we can talk about. But
please, one of my good friends, his wife has been on the case with this particular molecule. I can't even pronounce it. Deuterium.
Deuterium, yep.
Never heard of it before until I came in contact with you. Now,
okay. Well, that's the future. Just so you know, you saw some of my work, and that's why I wrote these songs with these characters, so you can understand. I told you to read the words, because the words tell you what this stuff does. So before we go to deuterium, the last component is about a ketogenic diet is the mitochondria itself. These are your energy plants, and they were designed to burn ketones. They can burn sugar, and you're supposed to burn that sugar at the end of summer when fruit is ripe. That's what that's for, because fruit is supposed to make you fat so you can make it through the winter. All right. But having ketones circulating throughout your body during the day, whether you produce them yourself or whether you drank bulletproof coffee, which has MCT oil, which will allow you to produce ketones instantly, these ketones go to your mitochondria. I'm putting this out there because I do want you to re-listen to this. You may or may not have heard of something called uncoupling proteins. Uncoupling proteins regulate how hard your mitochondria works. Ketones have now been found to de-stress your mitochondria and make them relax and produce really energy the way they're supposed to. So a ketogenic diet is very health promoting. It's also an epigenetic moderator in that ketones themselves go to your DNA to tell areas of your genes to be copied, saying, hey, ketone, open this section of DNA to make these chemical products. Because ketone bodies, the ketones that you're supposed to have, this is our fuel. There were no carbohydrates except for fruit in season. We ate meat and the fat of meat. They say that our ancestors were fat hunters. They wanted to eat all the fatty parts of the animal. So that's why a ketogenic diet is so profound. It's also extremely low in deuterium. And that makes a massive difference to your mitochondria, because deuterium will slow down your mitochondria's production. All right. So you'll see on that character Marty mitochondria with those little spinning rotors, when deuterium gets in there, it clogs up the spinning rotor and slows down energy production. It's like putting sugar into your gas tank. It's going to gum up your motor pretty quick.
So where does this stuff come from? Like what?
Sure. So deuterium is a natural substance, but it's concentrated in sugar and carbohydrates. Okay. So I'm going to go a little bit scientific here. We have to think about chemicals and elements. Everyone has heard of the periodic table of elements. I know it's horrible. You saw it in high school and you didn't want anything to do with it, but it's a listing of all the different atoms that we have in this universe. Now, the simplest and smallest atom and number one on the periodic table of elements is an element called hydrogen. Good time to show my hydrogen character right now. And you'll see hydrogen has the little yin and yang symbol on his chest. Now, there are three forms of hydrogen in this universe. The most common one is regular hydrogen called protium. It consists of one electron and one proton, the yin and the yang. The electron has a negative charge and the proton has a positive charge. And so this is the most simple and basic element in the universe. It's also the most abundant. There are three isotopes of hydrogen, and an isotope is simply a different form of a chemical that differs only in the amount of neutrons. Okay. Now, you've heard of an isotope, you've heard of carbon dating. Carbon has, I think, 16 isotopes, and they only differ in the amount of neutrons. And just so you know, everything that you see in front of you, everything that you're made of, your table, this computer screen is only made of three subatomic particles: electrons, protons, and neutrons. That's it. Every single atom, every single molecule is only made of those three components. Okay, that's it. Now, as we get up the periodic table of elements, we keep on adding an electron and adding a neutron. So when you think of carbon dating, well, what is it? Carbon is an isotope that they can, carbon-14 is an isotope they can measure, so they can tell you how old something is. So this is how they do carbon dating. And they can tell because in an MRI machine, you can see how many neutrons there are because they're visible. So in every single chemical, there are always isotopes. In hydrogen has three. One is called tritium, one is called deuterium, and one is called protium. Protium is Greek for one, deuterium is Greek for two, deuteros, and tritium is Greek for three. There's three extra, three neutrons, okay? Now, I know this is going to be confusing, but if you really want to understand about longevity and health and not getting cancer, you're ultimately going to have to embrace deuterium. I call it the devil you need to know. Deuterium marks the passage of time in biologic systems. It's what aging is. It's the difference between 0 and 1. So deuterium is a stable hydrogen isotope. Tritium is radioactive. It's not natural, and it's not found almost anywhere on Earth. It's found in the sun, and it's found in different, you can make tritium just like you can make heavy water. Now, right now, we're going through this experience with the Ukraine, and you know about Chernobyl. You know what heavy water is, or have you heard of heavy water? What's your recollection about what heavy water is?
No, I haven't, no.
Okay, so heavy water is what they make nuclear bombs from. So what we don't want is we don't want Iran to enrich uranium to make a nuclear bomb. And when you enrich uranium, you enrich it with extra neutrons. So life is very balanced, okay? And a very one out of every 6,400 water molecules actually has deuterium in it. So there's three forms of water, and this would be a great time to go to my book and go to one of my episodes of the Heroes of Light. It's called Water, the Magical Molecule, and it's starring deuterium and hydrogen. And I graphically represent the three forms of water that are available in this universe. There's H2O, which you know about and that you're used to drinking. There's HDO and there's D2O. What is that all about? So hydrogen and oxygen make water, H2O. You have an oxygen in the middle and a hydrogen here and a hydrogen there. That's H2O. But if you take away that hydrogen and you replace it with a deuterium, now you have HDO. And if you take away the other hydrogen and give deuterium, now you have heavy water, and that's D2O. And the reason I created these cartoon characters is because this is hard to get your mind around. Even when I say deuterium, I want you to have an image of that character that I created, because when you look at hydrogen next to deuterium, you can see it's double the size. And that's the issue, is that when you add a neutron to regular hydrogen, you double the weight. When you add a neutron to carbon, you don't double the weight, you only increase the weight slightly. And the difference between hydrogen and deuterium is the difference between life and death. That's why I call it deuterium father time and the devil you need to know, because this is what's found in sugar and carbohydrates. When they hydrogenate vegetable oils, they add a bunch of deuterium. And this is what makes those vegetable oils so dangerous, is they're loaded with deuterium. And this is only supposed to be balanced in nature. You're not supposed to have too much deuterium, because deuterium is balanced with sunlight. And if you live in the Arctic Circle and you're getting fruit shipped up from Chile, that fruit's full of sugar, and you're in the Arctic Circle, there's no sunlight. Deuterium and sunlight are balanced. You should only eat fruit where it's grown. If you have a pineapple and you live in Hawaii and you're outside without your shirt on, That's safe. Take that pineapple and put it up to Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and now you've got a toxic fruit. I used to think it was good to get fruit in Canada from the other side of the world, but it's dangerous because it's loaded with deuterium. And fruit, especially all the current fruit, is so sugary, and deuterium makes things grow faster. So they crossbred all the fruits to make them grow fast and be sweeter. And what they did over the last 15,000 years was highly increase the amount of deuterium in your body. So this deuterium slows down your production of energy. So there's one more reason a ketogenic diet is very low in deuterium. And now you know red meat and especially fat is extremely low in deuterium because your body uses this as a fuel, right? You've heard of camels that have the humps and they don't need to drink water. Well, your body makes water as the end product of mitochondrial function. And now you can begin to see, I see the look on your face, and you can begin to see just how badly we've been duped into how our health works. And that's why I created cartoon characters and wrote these books, because we're being poisoned by people who are supposed to be protecting us. We're being poisoned by our environment. And the poisoning is coming in two forms. It's coming in too much deuterium and too much, I use glyphosate as basically man-made junk, fertilizers and pesticides and herbicides and toxins. Glyphosate represents the evil men do for profit. Deuterium is something that's natural, but too much coming from processed food is what ages you. Sugar ages you. Carbohydrates are sugar. Oatmeal is sugar. When you break down oatmeal, it's not healthy at all. It's just a bunch of molecules of sugar all tied together, full of glyphosate and deuterium. If you like oatmeal, make sure it's organic, but don't think it's good for you. It's just a giant pile of sugar. Does that help you out with the ketogenic diet? Where did I lose you?
It leaves me wondering what's for breakfast, Dr. Gould. I mean,
nothing. Intermittent fasting. What's for breakfast is bacon and eggs, grass-fed, organic farmed, both bacon and eggs. If they feed chicken, corn, grain, and soy, not good for you. Chickens need to eat organic. Chickens eat grubs. They're not supposed to be eating corn, grain, and soy. So you are what you eat. So what's for breakfast? Steak and eggs, bacon and eggs, an omelet with cheese, as long as it's all grass-fed. I don't eat breakfast. I eat one meal a day. I have a bulletproof coffee in the morning. It's got butter and coconut oil.
And I was like, bulletproof coffee. Never heard of it before. What is that?
So there's a guy by the name of Dave Asprey, and he came up with this really great formulation. He was in the Himalayas, and they drank yak butter, and it kept you full and warm. So he came up with the idea to filter coconut oil and to make a coffee where you put in butter and coconut oil and then mix it around. And what it does is give you instant satiation, so you feel full. So I start every day with a bulletproof coffee. You don't have to use his brand, but he makes a good coffee that's organic. And you want to have coffee that's organic. You want to have everything that's organic. And so I start my day off with a bulletproof coffee. It's about a tablespoon of butter and 2 squirts of MCT oil called brain octane. And that keeps you full for many hours, but it immediately makes you feel full, and it gives you circulating ketones, which tell your body that you're healthy. It's an incredible biohack that everyone can do. And I start every day with it. I have one in the morning, and sometimes I have one. I don't have coffee past 2 because it'll keep you up, but it will keep you full. And it's what allowed me to lose weight and to become healthy. And that's what's missing from people's lives, is that hunter-gatherers didn't eat 3 meals a day and snacks. They feasted and they fasted. And that's where we'll go back to the pillars of health, because I'll simplify it. But feasting and fasting is how our bodies evolved. Hunter-gatherers ate a meal when it was available. And if they didn't eat for 2 weeks, their bodies burned the fat that they had stored, and they easily went into fasting. When I do 5-day fast, I don't feel hungry or get a headache. Most people would be passed out after 3 hours without food, but that's being metabolically flexible. And now you can put on the screen the lyrics to my song called Metabolic Flexibility. It's sung by Marty Mitochondria. And what metabolic flexibility means is that your body can shift, just like your car, from gas to electricity. Your body can shift from a sugar to fat. And it will not do that unless you're metabolically flexible. What does it take to be metabolically flexible? You want to know. You want to listen to Marty Mitochondria. This is a completely different, complex understanding of biology. And again, it's very simple to me because I have a doctorate of science with a background in molecular biology, but I created these cartoon characters because someone like you is highly educated on this, and it's still kind of like, whoa, this is a lot of information. So I filtered this down to these cartoon characters that sing and dance to share this information in a way so that ultimately we can't be fooled by big pharma, who has all these advertising tricks. They're going to make you feel guilty or make you see these medications. Only in New Zealand and in the US are the only two countries that allow direct to consumer advertising, but everyone around the world sees these ads. I saw them in Canada, even though they're not technically legal. But this is a completely different health paradigm that's not related to big pharma and how your doctor thinks your body works. This is how your body actually works. And it may seem complex, but once you understand how your body works, then you're not going to be fooled by this advertising. So when it comes to the pillars of health, you can go there. I have another graphic called the elements of life: air, earth, fire, and water. I like to always simplify things to make it stick in your head. There's only 4 aspects you have to look at in your life. Air is breathing during sleep. If you don't breathe properly in sleep, you choke. That's sleep apnea. Earth is what you eat and how you eat. What's your diet and how do you eat it? You could take the exact same amount of food and eat it throughout the day and have a completely different physical health than somebody who eats one meal at one time. And that's related to deuterium. That's related to how your body functions and how your mitochondria functions. The next is fire, and I call that radiation rules. You want to increase your natural sunlight and decrease your non-native light that you get from computer screens, blue light, and especially all the lights will be changed out to the inexpensive LED light. LED light is poison. You might as well know that Monsanto created both glyphosate and LED light. LED light is destroying the melatonin in your body. So I'm coming at you with so many different things. That's why I've got 3 books. I have all this stuff. This is going to take a while for people to understand. But in the meantime, people are dying from a lack of this understanding. The key features are ketogenic diet, intermittent fasting, radiation rules, get your natural sunlight, and sleep properly. If you're not sleeping properly, you're not healing and regenerating, and you're going to age prematurely. So air, earth, fire, and water, sleep and breathing, feasting and fasting, radiation rules. The last one is water. Water is the magical molecule. Now you know there's 3 types of water in this universe, and you want to know how to maximize your H2O and avoid your D2O or HDO. So your mitochondria makes water every second of the day that your body uses, and that is special water. It's called metabolic water, and it keeps you healthy. It's low in deuterium. And the second thing that we want to think about is something called structured water, and a guy by the name of Gerald Pollack. Structured water is the form of water. It's a gel in your body, and most of the water in your body is actually in the gel form, and that gel is made by sunlight entering into your body. It actually structures the water into a crystalline gel that your body uses to conduct energy. Your body works just like a microchip, and we conduct electricity. That's how we run. We're electromagnetic beings. So I'm sorry to throw so much that at you at once, but my information, if you take your time getting through there, and you'll find this all verifiable. Everything I'm saying has thousands of scientific studies behind it. It's just that it's a lot to take in. That's why I sent you my Deuterium Records website, because I wanted to squish it down. It's just a small, this is so much information to take in, but it's your future. If you don't understand what these chemicals are doing in your body, you're not going to be healthy. You're going to be made a fool of, and big pharma is going to utilize you as a profit center. And understanding what enzymes are, understanding these vitamins, minerals, this is critical to the future of the human race, but it's specifically critical to you as an individual person and how you age. And it's really as simple as that. So it's a lot of information. I'm sorry to take you so far off your path, but these are the answers to the questions that you're asking. And now that I've sort of let me sort of run on, stop and interrupt me at any point in time. Which part of that can I clarify for you?
Well, I guess does the book, your books, kind of wrap this up into a protocol? So folks, find the D stuff, fall onto it, and go, oh my goodness, like, why didn't I find out about this? And I'm happy to start doing keto. That's no problem as well, and keen to lose some weight. But what does the overall picture look from A to Z, from day 1 to day 30? And is that kind of teased out in your book? It's one thing knowing about the stuff, right, Joel, and going, oh, everything you're saying is making complete sense to me. What's next? What can I do tomorrow to turn it all around for myself and have optimal health?
Okay. So again, my ebook is just a preview of my material. I have 3 full books. This is a lot of stuff. There is no easy answer. Basically, this comes to the title of most of my paradigm is called MHG, and it stands for Modern Hunter-Gatherer. And the reason is you have the biology of a hunter-gatherer, but you live in the modern world. So you want to know how to become a modern hunter-gatherer. So I wrote a book called The Modern Hunter-Gatherer Survival Guide, and it's literally the human animals owner's manual. And that's how I wrote it. I wrote it like an owner's manual. When you get some new piece of equipment, you go to the quick start guide. So this book is not released yet because nobody's listening to me yet. And I'm not published on this, but I have a lot of different podcasts out there. So these books that will be released all in good time will really give you all the step-by-steps. But again, we'll go back to that elements of life. Air, earth, fire, and water. These are the classical elements of life that even before we knew science, that the scientists, Hippocrates, they knew these were the elements that all life depended on. And so, you have to breathe. Without breath, you can go, how long can you go without water? 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. How long can you go without food? A long time. But you can't go without air for more than 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and you'll die. So air is critical. Why is this important? Well, when you're breathing, James Nestor can talk all he wants about his breath stuff, and he's right about a lot of it. Nasal breathing is critical. We haven't even gone into that. But when you go to sleep, you can't do any breathing exercises. Your brain's in control. And the part of your brain that's in control is the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is the automatic nervous system. It runs all your housekeeping duties. So without you breathing properly at night, you're going to choke in your sleep. That's called sleep apnea. And you're not going to get enough oxygen. Your body has a choice, sleep or breathe. Breathing wins every time. And people's sleep will be destroyed by the idea that they don't have enough oxygen. So when your oxygen goes down, your brain gets a signal, hey, dude, we're choking, wake up. And that's what apnea is. It means without breath. So that's component 1. If you don't breathe properly when you sleep, you're never going to age well. You're going to get dementia. You're going to get Parkinson's. It all depends what flavor of dementia you're going to get based on your own DNA. But there isn't anyone on this planet who has Parkinson's or dementia that doesn't have low vitamin D and sleep apnea. Everyone who has cancer has sleep apnea. Sleep apnea is the epidemic. It's part of the modern epidemic. It's the air aspect. Okay. So the first thing you can do is raise your vitamin D level so that you can get into the right sleep zone. Second thing you can do is get a sleep study. If you're over 40 and you snore, get a sleep study. If you're over 50 and you snore, you probably have apnea. If you're 20, 30, 40, if you're younger, you don't have apnea yet, but it'll set in if you don't raise your vitamin D level. You'll cross that threshold. And when it comes to, so we have air, we have earth, what you eat and how you eat. As simple as that. Ketogenic diet, feasting and fasting. You want to get into a fasted state every day to allow your body to go into autophagy to get rid of the junk. Has to happen, preferably every night. Then fire is radiation rules. Block your blue block. I wear blue blockers at night past 8:30. And this is stuff I have on my website. I have them all around my house. I set an alarm for 8:30. 8:30 comes, I put on my blue blockers and I watch TV, go on my phone, go on my computer, but I block out that blue light. Why? Blue light destroys melatonin in your eyes. Melatonin controls your sleep, controls mitochondria, controls cancer. Vitamin D and melatonin are the yin and yang. Vitamin D is your daytime hormone, melatonin is your nighttime hormone. Breast cancer has been conclusively linked to blue light exposure. So blue light has been classified as a class 2A carcinogen. And they found this out because women who were working in jobs where they're up all night in convenience stores with blue light, they had a much higher incidence of breast cancer. And melatonin is the anti-cancer medication. And if you ask me, if you had cancer, you'd want a lot more melatonin in your life. But that's where the radiation rules come in. So right away, get rid of your blue light where you can, increase your natural sunlight, watch the sunrise, watch the sunset. As the sun comes up, all the different colors tell your brains, they set your circadian rhythm and set the clock that's in your brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. That's the main center that controls the rest of the clocks in your body. Most people who never see a sunrise or a sunset, their circadian rhythms are off and it's very hard to be healthy. And the last is water, just knowing what structured water is. Go in the sun, you make structured water. Eat a ketogenic diet, you make more metabolic water. That's it, air, earth, fire, and water. And each of these things are all lifestyle changes because you need to learn how to live like a hunter-gatherer. I don't want to go back into the wild. I'm not going to sleep on the ground, but I'm going to try and give my body the right sensory input by following these rules. And these are the rules of being a modern hunter-gatherer. It's really, technically, it's very simple. Your body's a sensor for the environment, and we take in signals through sight, sound, smell, touch, taste. And you know, the sixth sense is radiation. It affects your body, but you don't see it, smell it, or feel it. So it is an extra sense. That is the sixth sense. It's not ghosts. Sorry to tell people that. All right. I know that you had sort of brought that up. What is the sixth sense? It's radiation.
I mean, you've talked about epigenetics a couple of times during this talk, and people will have seen Bruce Lipton. He's got some crazy videos. I'm sure you've seen how he kind of says, you know, the way you interpret the world, and the epigenetics piece really is well. It's interesting, but I want to stick with the air piece for a little bit. The way that we're breathing is really interesting to me. And as I said, a lot of people that will be watching this have potentially followed my journey and watched my videos and are dealing with challenges around the breath themselves. Now, in terms of getting that good night's sleep, I've had a vitamin D level close to 80, 100 for 5-7 years now, Joel. But I still get up to piss a couple of times per night. So obviously I'm not doing something right. And I personally believe it's got a lot to do with breathing through my mouth when I sleep. So what am I doing wrong? Like, what can I do better to get that good night's sleep? My D level is obviously not the problem.
Right. So it's your B vitamins. That's the problem. Okay. If your D level is appropriate, then there's a system called the RAS system, the renin-angiotensin system, and it's very vitamin D dependent. So once you've raised your vitamin D level, if you're still not sleeping right, your body is not, the neurons in your brain that control sleep do not have enough B vitamins to produce enough energy. They do not have enough of B5 pantothenic acid to make acetylcholine. And what you're suffering from is early apnea. Now, you may already have sleep apnea because you were vitamin D deficient until, I'm not sure what age you discovered this, but you may already have apnea. People think apnea is something that their great uncle has and it's genetic because they're fat and they have a big neck. It's a neurological disorder, and you may not have apnea set in yet, but you're waking up because one of a couple of things. If your bladder's full, if you really drank too much water, it can happen. You can wake up. But if you routinely wake up 3 times a night to go to the bathroom, you are actually more waking up. Not so much the bladder sensation is waking you, but you're being woken in your sleep because your oxygen level is dropping because you don't have enough of the right neurotransmitters to keep you in sleep. That's what sleep apnea is. During the daytime, if your B vitamins are too low, you'll clench and grind your teeth or thrust your tongue. At nighttime, you will wake up because your brain cannot coordinate sleep and breathing. So we're supposed to breathe through our nose. Nasal breathing is how we were designed. Most people breathe through their mouth because their noses are clogged, and their noses are clogged from a vitamin D3, vitamin K2 deficiency in childhood. That's why I've created more cartoon characters to explain that the D3-K2 combination will result in proper growth, proper craniofacial growth. And I had a fight with James Nestor over this because he doesn't understand the chemical component. But if you don't have proper nasal breathing, all bets are off. When you're breathing through your nose releases nitric oxide into your lungs so that you can have proper expansion. So no matter what breathing exercises you do, if you don't breathe properly through your nose, you need to get that fixed. If you have a deviated septum and you have not been hit in the face, you have a deviated septum because you were vitamin D deficient as a child, and the cartilage in your nose calcified too early because you did not have enough vitamin K2. This is the classic long face syndrome. I have a podcast on this with Dr. Suzanne Bennett. It's about sleep apnea. Put in my name, Joel Gould and Suzanne Bennett. She's on Spotify. And I did a half-an-hour podcast about nasal breathing and vitamin D3 and vitamin K2. This is why kids are all coming down with pediatric sleep apnea. It's a D3, K2 deficiency. So the breathing system is supposed to be coordinated. And not to throw one more wrench into the works, is the part of the brain that regulates every part of muscle coordination is called the cerebellum. This is the brain center that goes from your brain, your thoughts, and your autonomic nervous system to control everything. And when you're sleeping, you can't control your breathing. Your brain's doing it. All right. So that part of the brain has some of the largest neurons called the Purkinje fibers, and they are the most sensitive to hypoxia, lack of oxygen. So over time, as you choke in your sleep, when your oxygen saturation goes below 90%, those neurons start to die. And as they die, your body's ability to control the movement of sleep and breathing, which is supposed to be a coordinated, the diaphragm goes down, the bronchioles dilate, everything dilates and air comes in. That whole coordinated system gets destroyed. Now it's repairable, but past a certain point, you've killed enough neurons in the cerebellum that you have broken your sleep system, and it will not work until you totally restore those neurons. And that's like doing a Control-Alt-Delete in your computer. You've got to get rid of that. And if you want to know how to do that, that's a whole different discussion. You're not going to like it. But sleep apnea is completely reversible if you're willing to do it. You can regenerate the brain. You just have to know how to get into autophagy on a regular basis, and you have to fast. And what you're really doing is just giving your body the right sensory inputs to repair itself. So did that make any sense to you?
No, it does. There are just so many moving parts, to that. And, I've read some fantastical reports of people that, like me, that have gone down the D path and haven't had success with the sleep part, and then chuck tape on their mouth. And 3 nights later, it's like, oh my God, I've had the best night's sleep I've ever had. Personally, I can't do it. I've tried taping a couple of times. I just feel claustrophobic. I rip it off.
Doesn't work for everyone. Quickly. Yeah, it doesn't work for everyone because it's more than just breathing. So for some people, forcing them to breathe through their nose can be very life-changing. I hear that a lot. For people with different conditions, it doesn't really work. And you may have to see an ENT or nose and throat doctor to clear out your nose to have proper nasal breathing. But ultimately, if taping your mouth works, you should do it. Do not tape your child's mouth. By the way, if you're listening to this, do not tape your child's mouth. That can be dangerous, but you can experiment. And for some people, it works quite well because there's no, modern medicine thinks that you have one problem and you have one pill and that fixes the problem. In reality, our bodies are so multifactorial. You can see how complex this is, but it's simple because the pieces fit together. And again, go back to the idea that humans are living in captivity and animals in captivity get sick. We are not smart enough as humans on this planet to know how to create this complex ecosystem that Mother Nature has right out the window. You just don't live there. You live inside this environment, which is a cage. So you're not giving your body the right sensory inputs.
Look, and if anything's happened over the past couple of years, it's that sentiment and that realization amongst people to say, like, I'm in real estate down here in New Zealand and I'm in the biggest city. And over the last year and a half, people have just wanted to get out. They've wanted to get down the country and get back in keel with nature. And so I absolutely get those comments. They really resonate with me. Joel, have you fallen down the trap? In terms of correlation versus causation, there's study after study being published. It's almost unbelievable how many studies are being done on vitamin D. It's just like every day there's multiple studies published. How do you keep yourself in check? Like, are you seeing things with biased glasses, possibly?
Yeah. Well, okay. So there's 2 types of studies with vitamin D. The proper ones where they take a blood level. Prior to maybe about even 8 or 10 years ago, the doctors doing these experiments had no clue what vitamin D was, and the design of the experiments were completely wrong, either intentionally or not. So when you see a study that says vitamin D, not such a big deal, take a look and see if they took a blood level. I saw a great study. They said, we gave vitamin D supplements to people and it didn't work. And what did they do? They gave 600 IU, they gave 2000 IU for 3 months. They never took a blood level. Anytime that you do a vitamin D experiment, if you don't take a blood level, take that study and throw it in the trash because it's useless. Imagine talking about testosterone. Oh, I took a testosterone pill. You check the blood level for testosterone. It's a hormone. Vitamin D is like a hormone. And so when you see a study that doesn't support something health related, look at who did the study, who funded it. What's the story behind it? There is no study on this planet that's not biased in some way. And I am completely biased about vitamin D. When I see a study that doesn't support my theory, I go to look and see, well, where did they go wrong? Why? Because I don't need a single scientific study to teach me common sense. I have a background in molecular biology. I created these cartoons to explain molecular biology. And when you understand what vitamin D is as a molecule and how it goes to the receptor, I don't need any studies to show me anything other than if I use my common sense. If I live outside at the end of the summer, my vitamin D level is 80 or 100. So right away, I don't even care about people walking around with 20 or 30. They're not going to be well. So take the first piece out of there. Your body needs to be outside. If you lived outside eating grass-fed animal products, you'd have a high vitamin D level, just like that friend of yours who ate well and had a D level of 80. So look at who's doing the study and then think about what are they trying to prove? And I want to go back to the analogy about water. They're wasting their time doing all these studies about vitamin D because they still don't understand how it works. If you have a subpar level of vitamin D and you give that person vitamin D, they're going to get healthier. They're going to have a better microbiome. They're going to sleep better and they're going to repair their body better. And they're going to get more of their DNA making enzymes to make them healthy. And it's a dose response mechanism up to a certain point. You can think of your vitamin D level as a reservoir. And if you're taking more water out of the reservoir than you're putting in every day, at a certain point, you're going to hit a really low threshold, like we are here in California. You got to keep that reservoir full. And that's why it's always the vitamin D level, not the dose. You can take 1,000,000 IU and you can try and fill your reservoir quickly. Or you can take 1,000 IU, you'll never get it full. So you have to think about what this is from a biochemical perspective and have some understanding of what it does in your body. And so even though I'm biased, that's how I feel about when I see studies. They did a meta-analysis and said, 50-50 good, 50-50 bad. Look at the studies that say it's bad. None of them took a blood level. None of them.
You know, I'm gonna ask you about testing and what folks should be testing, but just then humor me. What do you think when you hear people kind of reporting levels of 180 nanograms per milliliter, 200 nanograms per milliliter, whilst their calcium and parathyroid hormone may still be within normal reference? This to me is like a step too far. It's certainly not what our ancient hunter-gatherer was rocking around with, right? It's completely unachievable. So what would you say to people kind of advocating for levels, around way higher than this?
I don't agree with it because, again, I take my instructions from Mother Nature. So when I know that I personally have been to 100 and no higher, being in the sun, I know that levels over 100 are really not important. And they probably don't become unsafe until they get to the 250 range or even 300. Now, I don't recommend that people dose that high because it's not natural. It's just not natural. And there'd be no good reason to do that. Some people, if they're taking too much vitamin D, people are taking 20,000 or 30,000. That's far too much. You need exactly the right dose with what you need. And as you become vitamin D sufficient over time, your need for vitamin D can decrease over time. What you used to need may be lowered because this is a very different chemical than what people are thinking about. So someone like Stasha Gomenek, she used to take 10,000 IU of vitamin D. Now I don't think she takes any. And she just likens it to her body's repairs are done. So she no longer needs an excessive amount to make all these enzymes. So until somebody has,
I'd say conversely, for someone coming into it who may be taking significant amounts and getting tested, but they're not seeing any increase or any kind of significant increase in the right direction, that's again a perplexing situation to be in, to say, well, here I am taking 600 CRDI, I'm taking 6,000. It's 10 times the daily dose, but yet my level's not increasing. I get phone calls all the time. What do you say about that?
Well, this is kind of a bit of an obnoxious catchphrase, but science works for everyone. Okay. In the same way that someone says, oh, I took vitamin D and I had diarrhea, and they know that vitamin D caused them to have diarrhea, which they can't know. People say they're taking their vitamin D, but they're not necessarily. And I have people who come in saying, I've been taking vitamin D, it's not working. And I say, bring in your vitamin D, and they're taking 1,000 IU instead of 10,000 IU. This is, doctors make mistakes about this. So the average person, this is complex stuff. When I say to take 10,000 IU or 20,000 IU, I tell people to take 20,000 IU maximum dose unless they're sick or they have COVID, because that's the amount you could make naturally in one day going out in the sun for even a half an hour if you have your body exposed. So that's a physiologic dose. So when someone's low in vitamin D and they're nervous, I say take 20,000 IU. It sounds like a massive dose, but it's only 40,000 IU is 1 milligram, 20,000 IU is 0.5 milligrams. If I say this to my patients all the time, I say, if I say take 10,000 IU, it sounds like I'm trying to kill you. If I say take 0.25 milligrams, you say, doctor, is that enough? And you know what, the confusion around vitamin D, that's why I put in my book, Equations You Need to Know, showing you that this is confusing to doctors, and they're supposed to know this stuff. They have a background in chemistry and pharmacology, and they still don't know it. How can you blame the average person for not understanding this? This is confusing. And they go look it up. When my patients go home, they go, that Dr. Gould, he's sure into that vitamin D. And they go look up the RDA and they go, well, the RDA is 600 IU and he's telling me to take 5,000.
Yeah.
He's crazy. He's trying to kill me. But that's the world that we're living in. You know it because you've experienced this yourself. The D deception is very far reaching. It really is.
In terms of how often do you test your level?
I test a couple of times a year. I more do it out of curiosity. I want to know, what happened to me last year. I got COVID. I don't even know what year it is, but I got COVID. It was very interesting because I never supplement in the summer. But when the time change happened, I forgot to supplement because I'm so used to spending time outside. But here in LA, you got to be outside at noon with your clothes off to maintain that level. So I always used to supplement starting at the time change, start taking 10,000 IU a day. I didn't. When I got a scratchy throat, I realized I had forgotten to supplement vitamin D. And then I took 100,000 IU immediately, 100,000 IU in the evening. I kept on taking 100,000 IU with magnesium and vitamin K2 for 3 days until my COVID disappeared in 3 days. That was it. So that's how quickly it can work. And I don't advise people take 100,000 IU of vitamin D, but if you want to, it's perfectly safe. You can be injected with 2 million IU of vitamin D. There is no one-time toxic dose for vitamin D. It doesn't exist. Vitamin D is extremely safe. So don't be nervous about taking it. But yeah, get tests. I think the more you test, the better you can be because you can see what it's like to go in the sun. When winter comes, we can buy our vitamin D tests and send them in. They're $30 or $40. You puncture yourself. I recommend people buy a 4-pack, do a test when they start, do a test in 3 months, be cautious, get more testing. Again, this is a chemical. This is the only chemical that's ever had any scientific studies that are so related to cancer. Isn't this something you want to test a lot? Isn't this something you want to monitor really well? What else is there that doctors are monitoring that's important? Nothing like this. So yeah, do more tests. The idea that it's not covered, it's laughable. The Canadian government and the government of New Zealand would save trillions of dollars if they mandated every single doctor made their patients take 2,000 IU of vitamin D every day with magnesium and vitamin K2, or even better, 4,000. This would change the face of healthcare. Now, there's always a story of a doctor who took all of his patients up to a level of 60 on vitamin D and had to close his practice because he had no business. And I like that story. I don't know that it's true, but I like it because that's what people go in for. If you break a bone, you got to go see a doctor. But if you have a cough or a flu or an infection or infected tooth, need a root canal, these are all just vitamin D deficiencies. That's all they are. And the modern practice of medicine would collapse if everyone maintained a vitamin D level of 60 to 80. We would see a disappearance of just about every modern chronic disease. So there you have it.
And look, do you think folks should check their calcium and parathyroid hormone at the kind of dose levels we're talking about?
I don't believe it's important, no. So as your D level comes up, your parathyroid hormone goes down. They're inversely related. And what used to happen is the D level would fall, parathyroid hormone would go up, and that would prevent something called lipolysis. So you wouldn't be able to, when you're this is like a winter setting. So D level goes down, parathyroid hormone goes up, and it traps the fat in your body. That's why all the people who have low vitamin D are obese. They're stuck in permanent winter, or most of them. Obesity is a vitamin D deficiency, and eating the wrong food, staying out of the sun, and all that. So if you're nervous, check your calcium, check your parathyroid hormone. Show me all the studies of hypercalcemia. Show me if there's any of those studies that they ever took vitamin K2. And just so you know, I haven't seen a massive amount of studies where people who had very high vitamin D had calcification of their organs. If those studies are out there, you could send them to me. I haven't seen them.
Or kidney stones.
Kidney stones kidney stones is caused by lack of vitamin K2 and dehydration. Too much calcium doesn't cause kidney stones. Sorry, guys. But if you take vitamin D, if you too much vitamin D, if you take vitamin D without vitamin K2, yeah, because vitamin D was never available without vitamin K2. I call them soulmates because they go together. They're both brought on by the bright sunlight of summer and the green grass of summer, D3 and K2 together. That's why they're soulmates, SOLs for sun. So no, if you supplement vitamin D unnaturally with a pill and you don't take vitamin K2, yeah, you potentially could calcify your organs. I still haven't seen that. Many, many people are taking vitamin D without vitamin K2 or magnesium. And, we're not seeing people collapse from too much calcium, not yet anyway. I don't believe that. That's a fear-mongering story that doctors will tell you. It just truly doesn't exist. Again, I want to see those studies. I haven't seen them. I haven't found them.
In terms of, again, people coming into the vitamin D space, generally, in my experience, are doing so because they want to solve a health challenge that they have. Is there any reason for a healthy person, a person that considers himself in the prime of their life and in generally optimal health, to take vitamin D? And I preface that by saying, I run a vitamin D test here in New Zealand, but service here in New Zealand, and I get some fantastical feedback. I'm going to give some comments from one of my customers up on the screen that, you'll see here, has increased his running performance significantly. And came back to me to say, could this be down to the D? I don't know. I've done nothing else different here, but I've just run 29 kilometers. And I tell you what, the next day I had no recovery pains whatsoever. I'm blown away. I just wanted to give you the feedback. What do you say to that, Joel? Is that kind of something that people in good health might expect to see when they supplement vitamin D?
Right. So think about what we've been talking about vitamin D levels. So the answer to the question is, number one, what was that person's vitamin D level before, even though they were healthy? Because not everybody with low vitamin D gets sick right away. Some people have a stronger genetic profile and it doesn't affect them as much. But there's a guy.
Yeah. So just for people watching, then in that case, it was him and his wife. He originally heard me speak at a Toastmasters meeting regarding vitamin D. Went, oh, that's interesting, and got the tests. They were both in the 20s and decided to take a loading dose of 600,000 international units with an end of view to get closer to 80. So that's kind of what he took.
Sure. So your vitamin D level is linked to your mitochondrial production of energy. Your vitamin D level is linked to your sleep and your gut microbiome. Because those DNA of your microbes outnumber ours 100 to 1, creating a good gut microbiome can produce all kinds of wonderful chemicals to help you stay healthier. They experience this. Now, what happened to me was I was in pain, back pain, neck pain. It disappeared. Now, Dr. John Cannell has written a book called Quicker, Faster, Stronger with vitamin D, and it's available on Amazon. It's an incredible book, and he specifically tells the story of the Olympics that were done in Mexico City, and all the athletes went to Mexico City early to train and acclimate. Mexico City is a very high elevation, and the higher your elevation, the more vitamin D you'll make. All the world's records were set at that Olympics because all the athletes had increased performance. And the only unifying factor is that there's much more sunlight and vitamin D producing UV radiation available at higher elevations. His book is fantastic because it's going to answer a lot of questions. So when you're sick and you take vitamin D, you feel better. If you're already healthy, you take vitamin D, it will improve your skin quality, your sense of smell, your eyesight, and your muscle recovery. Why? Well, just the sleep component alone. If you sleep really well after you run a marathon, That's when your body sends out human growth hormone. That's when your body does its repair work, is when you're sleeping. So if vitamin D improves your sleep, of course you're going to have a decrease in pain. So this makes perfect sense.
It's interesting, I guess, and in particular in the kind of the athletic performance and sports performance, like any gain is a good gain, right? So it's like you'd be scratching your head to say, well, why wouldn't you if this happens? Another guy, and this is again a really good one for you as a dentist. He says, Craigo. They love me here in New Zealand, Joel. They really do. He says, Craigo, just had something quite interesting. I'm fairly certain it's related to vitamin D, perhaps some of the cofactors I've been taking. Long story short, I had an impacted tooth from a car crash, developed an abscess at the base of the root and into the bone. Over time, this abscess eroded a large hole in my upper jaw into the roof of my mouth cavity. We tried fixing it a couple of times with a root canal and draining the excess, but over the course of 2 years, the bone never recovered and the hole remained. I had a third root canal to drain the abscess about 9 months ago. Then I was going to return to have the bone surgically filled. Anyway, COVID delayed the operation, and he started the vitamin D regimen in between that time. And he went back and saw his orthodontist, and he says he's had an X-ray. The endodontist was blown away at how the bone was almost entirely repaired and the hole was filled, something he had never seen before in this instance. Literally, the only difference between the previous root canals and the last time was increased consumption of vitamin D and cofactors. Is this sensationalizing an experience, or is this well within what you might expect as a dentist, Joel?
So it's actually irrefutable. So first thing you can do is Google bone loss, periodontal disease and vitamin D in PubMed, and you'll find studies that show that periodontal disease is a vitamin D deficiency. Dental caries, cavities is a vitamin D deficiency. I noticed this on my own. I had this, I'm in Manhattan Beach, a lot of young mothers here. And I would always have these women in their third trimester of pregnancy who would have a root canal that would become reinfected. Now, I've done my share of root canals. My root canals are good. And I thought, what is it about that? And it's the last thing you want to do is redo a root canal on a woman who's in her third trimester. Well, women in trimester have complaints: snoring, weight gain, insomnia, and urinary tract infections, all kind of stuff. Because in the third trimester, if a woman is not supplementing at least 6,000 IU of vitamin D every day, the baby's going to be taking the priority. The D level drops so profoundly that any bacteria that were walled off by the immune system suddenly start to get activated. And it's absolutely a vitamin D3 and vitamin K2 deficiency, because the bone gets dissolved when you don't have enough calcium coming into your body. Your body's going to steal calcium from your bones. That's what osteoporosis is. And when you have bacteria in your body, if you're not actively fighting off that bacteria, they're going to get reactivated. Vitamin D regulates the immune system, and specifically the production of over 200 antimicrobial proteins that literally control your bacteria. That's why COVID is related to vitamin D. That's why every viral infection, every bacterial infection is related to low vitamin D. Hospital infections, low vitamin D. There's the acute necrotizing fasciitis, where you basically have
flesh eating.
Yeah, that's a vitamin D deficiency. Check the people's levels. Those are people who have levels less than 5, they'll die. So vitamin D regulates the immune system, and how it works is your immune cells themselves, if they don't have enough vitamin D, they cannot copy the part of their DNA that makes them function. They can't open the DNA and copy the antimicrobial proteins. So without enough vitamin D, the immune cells, the neutrophils, you see Johnny Neutrophil is one of my characters, without having that level of vitamin D, you cannot open your DNA to make the antimicrobial proteins. Your immune cells don't work by magic. They go near your infection and they spew these antimicrobial attack dogs, and it kills the viruses or the bacteria. If your vitamin D level is too low to make those proteins, you're going to have a bacterial infection. It's
sure. I think we've heard lots about beta defensins and cathelicidin over the past little while in response to COVID. It's been fascinating to see those pathways teased out. Ninja Nerd did just a fantastic lecture on the subject So, look, as we start to wind this down, Joel, what's next in the vitamin D space? I mean, I feel like a lone gunman with a couple of comrades down here in New Zealand flying the vitamin D flag. I tell you what, I feel ostracized by many as a crazy dude. But as you say, I know it's not snake oil. Do you see more and more people becoming aware? What's going to happen to the supplement industry, and what risks do you think are presented along with an increased supplementation of vitamin D in the general public?
Well, so it's always best to keep yourself healthy with natural things. If I can go in the sun and make vitamin D, that's going to be better than taking a pill. It's definitely better to supplement vitamin D than to have it run low when you're living in an area where you cannot make vitamin D. And you cannot make vitamin D in the winter in New Zealand. It can't be made because the sun is not high enough in the sky to break that bond on cholesterol that makes vitamin D. So of course you should supplement in the winter, but if you have the opportunity to make your vitamin D naturally, the less pills I can take, the happier I am. The more organic I can eat, the less supplements I have to take. So what I think is happening or going to happen, I'm a revolutionary. As far as I'm concerned, so are you. I'm leading the resistance. The reason I put all my information out there is that I was kept sick my entire life because of the big pharma industry and their desire to make money. They have not sworn an oath to do no harm. Doctors have. Big pharma is a for-profit company. So the paradigm that we're living under right now, it's crumbling in front of our eyes, except that not everybody's seeing it. And everyone's going to fall out of the paradigm that they're in on their own time. That's why I created so many different tiers of information, because people will fall out of their belief system a little at a time, and they may have that realization. Some people will never understand this, and we can't fix everyone. My goal as a healthcare provider is to continue to make the science accessible, understandable, and even fun. I'm basically working to bring scientific knowledge at a molecular level to people, and especially kids who are interested. They'll memorize anything. I'd rather have them memorizing the words to my songs, and they'll be singing "I'm a stable hydrogen isotope" in a song form. Later on, as they delve into my paradigm, they're going to love it. The parents will get freaked out and say, "Mom, this is enos." "What's that, honey?" "Endothelial nitric oxide synthase." Kids love this stuff. It's adults that have a hard time. Kids want to memorize everything, and you can have them memorizing the words to the WAP song at age 11. You don't really want your kids to be saying those words, or we can substitute it with important information about your health. So because of what happened to me, I lost my life because this information was not available. In my book, you'll read about Dr. Weston A. Price. He was a dentist that in 1938 published a book called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. If you haven't read that book, go online and look at it. Read the first 30 pages. Have you seen that book?
Yeah, it's an amazing book. Yeah.
Well, it blew my mind. Well, I didn't see that in dental school. I went to dental school in Canada. So when I called the dean of my dental school and said, "Hey, buddy, ever hear of Weston A. Price?" He was like, "I got to go. I can't talk to you." And just because the medical industry is trying to keep you sick, it's a sick care system, doesn't mean you have to do what they want. It's everyone's responsibility. You can't sit in a chair and order fast food, just like you said, and expect to be healthy. There is no magic bullet. When they make a pill that keeps you fit and healthy and happy and sane, and you can eat whatever you want and sit around a chair, you let me know, the world will be over, this simulation will be over. Mother Nature requires that you utilize her rules and her regulations to stay healthy, because you cannot fool Mother Nature. They'll never come up with a pill. The closest they're ever going to come is an uncoupling pill. That's going to be so you can eat what you want. Your mitochondria will burn off everything as heat, but that's not what life's about. Life is about putting the time in.
Yeah, and probably a few of my viewers will roast me, subscribers will roast me for saying this, but you can't fool Mother Nature. And I tell you what, that's probably one of the biggest concerns in and around the mRNA platform that they're now using, and the optimization of codons is you cannot fool Mother Nature, although we seem to be celebrating the fact that we've been successful in getting her to produce a certain spike protein, which if we hadn't played around with the genetic code for that spike protein, our cells, our ribosomes would have said, that's not for me, and I'm not making that particular protein. Thank you very much.
That's correct.
And I believe that's a topic and aspect of the mRNA platform and the vaccines that really hasn't been discussed and brought out in the open. I'm sure, for the religious folks and the people that believe in a creationist's point of view towards life would be absolutely horrified to understand actually how the genetic code was optimized for that spike protein. But anyway. Joel, where can people jump on and just check out some of the stuff, mate? Like, are you on Insta? You got a website there?
Yep. So my paradigm is modern hunter gatherer. So you can find me on Instagram at modern_hunter_gatherers, or my website, modernhuntergatherers.com. And my name, Dr. Joel Gould. I have a dental website that's exclusively for dentistry, but my MHG site, this is the site where I get to talk about all the fun stuff. I have a vitamin line that I branded with cartoon characters to make this relatable. And you can also find me, as you know, at deuteriumrecords.com. I'm now a music producer.
This is outrageous, by the way. I was listening to a couple of the tracks. We'll link it in the description. Outrageous.
Yeah. Well, that's what needs to happen. What happened to me and what happened to you was outrageous. This is not right. And knowing that Weston A. Price figured this out over 90 years ago at this point in time, and I had to suffer for 34 years, this isn't right. And so my mandate in life, I've been a dentist for 32 years. And moving forward, my goal is to take the information that would have changed my life and your life and to bring it out into mainstream society and put it into the media with cartoons. And you see the stuffed animals behind me. This is going to be bigger than Pokemon. Pokemon means nothing. What do you learn from Pokemon? Absolutely nothing. It's $1 billion industry. These cartoon characters will tell your children about how their bodies work so that you will not be fooled by advertising. When kids of this generation that I'm trying to get to are looking into their health, understanding what an enzyme is from an age of 8 or 9, understanding what these chemicals, these vitamins and minerals do in your body is going to be profound. You can find my cartoon characters on Instagram. Look up Marty Mitochondria. I created Instagram pages. I'm bringing these characters to life because it needs to be done. If Weston A. Price failed, he never got his information out there, and I suffered my whole life because of it. I am personally taking on this mandate to change the health paradigm, and I'm going to make it fun and memorable. It's overwhelming. The science is overwhelming, but you cannot fool Mother Nature. And I want people to understand that you have the biology of a hunter-gatherer, but you live in the modern world. You want to know how to be a modern hunter-gatherer. I say, join your tribe. That's our tribe,
And you just can't go back, right? I mean, as much as I'd love to go bush, you're connected into the system whereby, you need some techniques and skills to be able to navigate it optimally, healthily, to get the absolute best out of it for yourself and for your family, which is what we all want, right? We just want the best for our families, and I get it. So, Joel, man, thank you. It's an interesting talk, this one, because, as I say, there's been some new information thrown my way, and I'm sure folks will be feeling the same. I'll do a good job in adding the graphics team, and I'll make sure that everything that we've discussed here is supported in the description by links. You can go and explore the stuff for yourself. As I say, it's not snake oil. Like, it's not snake oil. You need to know about this stuff.
I know. Well, what I kind of like to say is that I choose snake oil over big pharma because at least snake oil is natural.
It's a good one. It's a good one.
Right.
Thanks, Joel. All the very best to you, and we'll be following your journey.
Yes, sir. It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for allowing me to share my information with your listeners. I appreciate it.